Okay, hello. This
Hello,
is
everyone.
hello. This is Max. Oh, I didn't even set up. Oh my gosh! See, I'm so eager for just going right into this interview that I was gonna set up like a little camera to see your little Discord bubble light up so they know when you're chatting. Uh, anyways, uh, hello to all the folks in my audience. Today is a special day. We have. I'm gonna call you Max, but could you pronounce your name properly?
Yeah, it's Maxime Vézina, which is like a French Canadian name, so that's why it's harder to say in English.
Yeah, especially because my French pronunciation is definitely no good. So
That's all good.
Max is fine.
Yeah, honestly, everyone calls me Max, so
it's the
it just
easiest.
fits. Yeah.
Okay, we'll call this window capture Discord. And there we go. Oh wow, it knew exactly what I'm trying to capture. There's Discord. And oh, they can see our chat. Oh my gosh. They can see all the naughty things we've said, talking shit about other developers. Where's my gosh, I don't know. I don't there's crop. Okay. And we'll just crop this down. So, yeah, for my viewers, Max was the developer of Retrigger, which I played on stream. Gosh, I don't know. It was probably 3 months ago at this point. I don't really recall. It's
Yeah,
been a
that
little,
sounds right.
yeah, it's been a little while. And I since then have kept up in your Discord, mostly been lurking. Not that there's much to do in your Discord. Not gonna lie, your Discord's kind of a ghost town.
It is.
It's a little disappointing. I tried creating some conversation in there one time. Someone, I don't know, someone had like left had said something. I don't know, like, why is Red Trigger one of the greatest games ever? I think is what they
Oh
said.
yeah.
And I was like trying to start a conversation in there, be like, I don't know. Why don't you guys tell us why you think it's the best game ever? And it was just crickets. Okay. Well,
Yeah, yeah. This Discord needs clearly more activity. Uh, but yeah, me wearing all the hats, of course. I
yeah,
didn't really have the time to like engage conversation there. I do interact a lot with the community when I see new messages, but I'm not like s- starting conversations.
yeah,
Clearly, I would need like a community manager or something that would help really a lot on that front.
yeah. I understand. My own Discord, which is smaller than yours, because I mean, no one knows who I am. I have what is it, 800 subscribers, but most of those subscribers on my YouTube channel are dead, anyways, from
Mm.
a bygone era of when I used to review anime.
Right, right.
So, all those subscribers are mostly dead. I'd probably say if we didn't count the dead subscribers, I'd maybe have 100 subscribers. So, you know, no one really knows who I am, but yet I'm kind of surprised. My Discord's pretty active. Humble brag, of course. All right, there. God, I played around with that a lot. All right. And I'll put that, where do I want to put that on the screen? I don't know. I guess the top left corner is fine. There. Now we can see when you're chatting.
Perfect.
Okay. So, yeah, and as I suspected, we don't even have people showing up yet. Oh my gosh.
We're talking to a ghost town. It's like
Yeah,
by
well,
Discord.
because as you already know, the timing is weird because I live in Japan.
Mhm.
And so obviously the time zone sucks for all of my North American viewers. It's like really early in the morning, as you know. Thanks for waking up for this.
Oh, you know, it's all good. Uh, I mean, I should get up at these hours, but yeah, as a creative, a lot of creative prefer to work later. So yeah, I am used to getting up later.
Yeah, I know how that is. Usually when it's the darkest outside and I'm at my most tiredest, I tend to come up with the best ideas. So,
Yeah, honestly, it's the same for me.
so I do my best dev work when I'm completely exhausted and tired.
Yeah, well, it's often like you go into some kind of a zone, and when it's like late evening, usually you won't get like bothered by messages or like someone else. So I don't know, it's easier to really get into the groove.
Yeah. Oh, and I had this. I recorded some gameplay earlier, so we can show off Retrigger in the background while we chat.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So this is actually earlier. I had posted those bug reports in your Discord, and that was because I was trying to capture this footage here.
Yeah.
I didn't expect you to reply right away, so when I couldn't figure out what was going wrong with the reboot, I was just like, fuck it, let me try playing the original version. And so I just jumped right into that and started capturing the footage that you see here.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to play through the original version again. Just kind of seeing the difference between the two. I noticed some like interesting adjustments to the puzzles. I think sometimes for the better. Made more logical sense, made kind of teaching the player what to do more sensible. Like here, the way I solved that puzzle, I know there's a stream delay, you'll see it. The way I just solved that little beginning puzzle, it's not necessarily the correct way. I think there's supposed to be a ramp on the other side that I didn't see, so you're supposed to walk up the ramp and then trigger the two
yes.
So, so you know, I think in the reboot, or sorry, the remaster, you kind of made that a little bit more clear.
Yeah, it's indeed because I watched so many Let's Plays, which is good to see like player behavior and all that, and I saw that some mechanics were not understood well, so I changed the level design so that it's almost impossible not to learn the mechanic. So it turned out fine even before, because you don't need all the mechanics to go through, and that's also a design philosophy that I have, that like having multiple solutions is totally fine and even more fun. But yeah, there's, especially for the beginning of the game, I didn't want that, however, because yeah, like there's the for example, the middle click, where you can just you can just propel yourself without looking down, which is so much better. And that's something that wasn't well understood. So of course, it's never 100%, but you can play with some levers in the design to really improve that. So yeah, and I never want to pause the game and put a wall of text to explain that. I don't think it's like good for the pacing. So instead, I use the level design to teach that.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely think that's the best way to go about it. It's funny that you mentioned the middle click thing again. I completely forgot. I remember you telling me that when I had streamed it last time, and I was like, "Oh yeah," and then I totally forgot it for the rest of that stream. And then this time, in both of these, I know it's not in the original version, right? Because you added that in the remaster, right? The middle click.
No, it is in the original.
Oh, it is. Okay, well, either way, then in that case, in both of these, I completely forgot about it anyway, so I never use it.
That's fine. It's more of a tool to like make you more aware of your surroundings instead of having a huge red block on your screen.
Right.
So yeah, but it still works without it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's also, I'm glad you brought up about tutorializing stuff without big blocks of text.
Yeah.
So it's funny because of the genre that I mostly interact with, JRPGs, especially from a lot of amateur hobbyist developers. It's funny, it's something I often complain about quite a lot on my streams is I'll run into these games that just have like massive blocks of text. It's you get this. First of all, it's exhausting because often how it goes is it's JRPGs and people and fantasy where people love to just lore dump everything. So you click start.
But it's not the place to do it.
You're right. So you click start game, and then first you get bombarded with just text after text about the lore of the world. And then you finally get in the game, and then here's like a massive, text box after text box about how to play the game. And it's just like, by the time I get to any of the combat, just playing the game, I am just completely overwhelmed and just exhausted because I've not gotten to play the game that I downloaded. All I've had to do is sit there and just stare at text boxes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's I mean it's something very natural to do, and it's like it makes sense why devs do it. But yeah, it's of course way harder to teach things to the player in like a natural way, like through the level design.
Right.
But it's so much more satisfying both for the developer and the player. And yeah, I think like the key phrase is the famous like show don't tell. And it's really like the most you can just have the environment teach you instead of outright telling the player, the better it is. So yeah, but it is very, very easy to forget that rule. But in the end, it really just makes your experience way better.
Right, and I actually think this was one of the questions I had on the interview sheet that I think I wound up actually cutting, but since we're talking about it, is like, so the thing is with JRPGs is often a lot of the mechanics can be pretty abstract. It's just like, like this mechanic makes the number go higher, but unless players are like really paying attention to what the damage numbers are, they may not pick up immediately on such an abstract concept, right? Mm-hmm. So just I want to hear your thoughts on how might you tutorialize something a little bit more abstract?
Yeah, it's a good question because of course it depends a lot on the context, but it's sure like I think it's a mix of different things that you can do. Like I said, never ever pause the game with text. But what you can do instead is have like a little like tip box that pops up, like either like on the corner of the screen or the middle. But then again, you could be surprised how much, like even if there's a little bit of text in the middle of the screen, players won't even see it. Like the first Retrigger is actually a good example of that. With, for example, the famous middle click. But right. If you put a little sound cue, it also helps, like while the tutorial is showing. But I would say again, like the best is really to force a situation where you don't have a choice but to learn that. So, for example, turn-based combat, if you want to show some special things with numbers, maybe you can really make sure that what happens in the simple tutorial combat, like you show them those numbers, and like naturally the player will be like, oh wait, why did, for example, the enemy make more damage than me by doing the same thing? So it's really using things to like trigger a reaction, and then with that reaction having a learning.
Yeah, I really put you on the spot trying to tutorialize a genre you're not familiar with.
No, that's all good. I love talking about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, it's funny that you mentioned about putting the stuff in the like middle of the screen and stuff. Especially in like a lot of the RPG Maker games, this is just a quirk with the engine itself. The thing is with RPG Maker is it's basically, you don't have to know how to make a game, right? Its whole gimmick is that it's basically a game in the box. You can change some numbers around and basically have your own Final Fantasy. Of course, there's also the other part to RPG Maker that the whole back end of it is open. So if you are smart and you know what you're doing, you can also make really great games. Well, we can talk more about that later. But anyways,
yeah.
So out of the box, what RPG Maker tends to do is you'll have your skills listed at the bottom, and then at the top of the screen is the skill description. And from my own playtesting, I've noticed that I almost tend to like, because there's such a disassociation between highlighting the skill and the text at the top changing. There's like, it's a battle scene between the two that it doesn't feel connected. So what I wound up doing in my own game is I move the description box down to be right on top of the skill box, so that way you can see the text change as you select the skills. So it's a little bit more obvious.
Yeah, that's a good example of, I would say, like, it's a mix of UI and UX, and those little things can really make the whole difference, honestly. It's like, it's almost a science by itself.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, from my own experience, too, is the sound effects definitely make a difference. You mentioned that, like having a little chime or something whenever you show something. But also motion tends to really catch people's attention as well, so...
Yeah, sometimes you just put a little glow on your box and it just like it lowers and goes higher in terms of intensity.
Right.
And just that like puts kind of a pulse on it, and yeah, it really draws the eye to that.
Right, yeah. So, yeah. If you, I don't know, this is kind of a silly question. I don't know what types of games you enjoy playing, and we can talk about that soon, but I don't know how much of a JRPG player, or just RPG games in general, not necessarily JRPGs. But I guess I should ask, if you were gonna make some type of JRPG, do you have an idea just off the top of your head? What would be your gimmick? What would be your gimmick for it?
The gimmick. Oh, that's a good question. I do like a lot, like the Paper Mario series, and
that's a good one.
Yeah, and there's a new game that came out very recently called Born of Bread, I think, which is inspired by it. And I don't know, those games really have so much charm.
Yeah.
But yeah, as a gimmick, I mean, pretty much all the all the Paper Mario's games have a specific gimmick. On top of my head, it's hard to say which one it would be, but clearly it would be something that is both there in terms of traversal and combat, which is the case in the Paper Mario games. Like, for example, I don't know, the fact that you can, well, of course you're like paper, and so you can, for example, be super slim and fit into small spaces. Well, that mechanic is also in the combat to like avoid being hit, and so that clearly makes a good link between those two, I would say, like states of the game, which I think is important, because I do see a lot of RPGs that have kind of this disconnect there of like, you explore the world, it feels like one game, and then you have the combat, it feels like another. So yeah,
it's actually a really interesting point. it's kind of obvious now that you've said it, but it's almost never really occurred to me like that. But it's very true, right? You have the combat, which is basically entirely different than the rest of the exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good point. Food for thought. The way that I have done it in my own game is, to an extent, there's some connection between the world. It kind of has this, I would say, vaguely Zelda-like kind of design, vaguely Metroidvania-like. Like, it's not like, when you think of Metroidvanias, like, it goes hardcore into, like, the backtracking and stuff like that. My game doesn't really go hardcore into the backtracking stuff, but...
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be.
Right, but with my own game, it does kind of, just like in Zelda, you'd explore a dungeon, you get a cool gadget, you can use that cool gadget to access new areas, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, in my game, I do have gadgets that kind of interact with the combat. For example, my game is built around just a single party character. A lot of, like, if you're thinking of, like, Final Fantasy games, you often have multiple party characters. So, first of all, fun balancing challenge. How do I make combat not completely wreck the player when all of the damage is focused on the one and only character? But that resulted in coming up with one of the gadgets. You can craft a decoy. It's used for... it's a chisel and hammer, and you use it for, like, crafting stairs in the world. But then you can also use it in combat to craft a statue to act as a decoy to kind of offset some of the damage that's being aimed at the character. Yeah. So.
Well, see, that's a good example of mixing the two, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good move to do that.
Yeah, I'd have to think more about that. The other two items in my game don't necessarily have the same interaction. My game's pretty small in scope, and it's already taking me too long just... But I'm sure you could relate.
Oh, yeah.
The other two items are basically to combat avoidal items. They both kind of play the same role, which is maybe not the best. The other item is a lightning rod, and you can use it to target enemies, and when they are within your range, you can shock them, and it will stun them temporarily, slow them down, so you can avoid combat. The other...
I mean, that seems like there's an obvious thing you can do in combat as well with this, like stunning the enemy for one turn or something.
Yeah. So the way I don't want to make this I don't want to make the whole interview talking about my game. Yeah.
I mean, we're just having a fun conversation, so.
Yeah. But yes. If you get me talking about my game, I'm the egotistical person who will just sit here and spend the next 3 hours just chatting about it. And it's like, oh, damn, we're here for Retrigger, and I just talked about my own game. I guess to give a quick summary, there's like 3 skills. Those 3 skills, 3 elemental skills that you start with. You have like a wind skill, a shock skill, and a fire skill. All the skills more or less do the same damage. But they have like a unique effect, like the wind skill will drain enemies' MP over time. It'll leech the MP from the enemy, so you can restore MP while you're stealing their MP. Right. And then you have the shock skill, which basically does what you were just suggesting with the lightning rod, where it has a chance to stun enemies. It works like in the way of Pokemon, where, like the paralyze effect in Pokemon has like a random chance of losing the turn, right? Yeah. And then the fire one, it's the obvious go-to is damage over time. So, anyways, so yeah, I don't know. I'd probably have to think more about that, but don't want to linger on that. I'd rather focus on you. First, I just noticed that the Nerd Mansion is here, so thanks for joining. Wow. He says, AAA games will always be better than indie games. Fiddle in the Maker's Trial will always be better then Anthem proved me wrong. So my very janky first game, just to learn the RPG Maker, the engine, was Fiddle and the Maker's Trial, which is what he's referencing. So that's
right.
quite. It's even my janky first game that I built in. I think it was a month. I think it was 1 month. I built the whole game in 1 month just to learn the engine. It was my first time, honestly, really making any sort of game. I had like done some Unity tutorials before. I'm too fucking dumb for Unity. I followed the tutorial and left more confused than I had started. So,
I mean, you dodged a bullet there anyway.
so, which is why I wound up with RPG Maker, because, you know, like, sorry, if I was a smart developer like Mr. Max here, then yeah, I'd be using Unreal. But I don't know. I look at the user interface and I'm like, I don't know what the hell is going on here. So I'll just go with the children's toy of a game engine. Just call it good enough.
Yeah, I mean, those engines can be super powerful, but yeah, the learning curve is kind of steep. So yeah, it's really
brutal.
like yeah, it really is, and it's the same for 3D software. Like I learned Maya first, and usually the first software you use will almost always be your favorite, because yeah, you learn like the shortcuts and the logic and all that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's really tough to like push yourself to learn something new, even if in the long run it's gonna be better. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I have like firsthand experience with that. I have been producing music for most of my life. I grew up using coincidentally, a software marketed very similar to RPG Maker called Mixcraft. I mean, their whole marketing is that it's music made easy. And I made plenty of tunes with that. But as the versions went on, it just became buggier and buggier.
Yeah.
And like the way that like their business model was like, they would only support the new version release for, I don't know, like maybe a year at best, with like 2 major updates. And then they would just move on to working on the next new version. And like any bugs that get left in were just left in. And it's like, I just got so sick of it that I was like, I finished my album back in 2020. And it was like my first like real major album production that I put a lot of effort in. And I had to fight that software tooth and nail to get this done because of just the crashes and the bugs and all that shit, that once it was done, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm gonna find another software. I cannot deal with this anymore. And that took forever. It took me forever. I trialed every music software under the sun and just always found myself saying like, fuck! How do I do this? I know how to do this in Mixcraft, but I can't for the life of me figure out how to do it in this program.
Yep. Yeah, it's the same for me with like I'm trying to switch to Blender because many reasons, and yeah, every time it's like as soon as I get like some how do you call it? It's not tension. It's well, I forget the term, but it's like friction. Yeah, every time I get friction of like how do I do this, and it's simple, then like the easy way out is like screw it, I'm gonna go back to my but yeah, it's difficult to really get into the mindset of like pushing through.
Yeah,
even if it's better.
I don't know if I really push through. Also, Mr. Orc is now in the chat. Thank you for joining. I don't know if I really pushed through. The software that I ended up using, I fell in love with because you can customize it to be like anything you want. You can rebind all of the shortcuts. You can adjust the user interface however you want. I wound up spending, I don't know, it was a long time, probably like 4 hours or something, like just going through the whole software and just adjusting it to work like Mixcraft. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I really pushed through in the end. Instead, I just found a software that let me do the same thing I was doing before, but better.
Yeah, and that's like the normal behavior, I would say. It was the same like the first time I put it up Blender. I changed everything to be like Maya.
Yeah. Look, all the people are joining now. We got Wrath of Wood. Wrath of Wood likes to make fucking weird games. And Blue Blade of Fate, we call him RCX. He's a cool guy. He says, "Hello, Mr. Retrigger."
Hello. And for the record, I like probably 100% disagree with the title of the stream.
What,
if anything, it's usually the contrary for me.
What, Mr. Retrigger?
No, the title of the stream of like AAAs will always be better than indie games.
I mean, if we look at the hard numbers, right? If we just look at hard numbers of the number of indie games that get released compared to the number of AAA games that get released,
yeah,
there are definitely a lot more shitty games or weird-ass Wrath of Wood indie games out there than AAA games that, people can actually play and understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on, like, I would say I don't like saying this, but, like, the minimum quality threshold. But yeah, like there's so many gems, indie game gems that feel like games that were made like before everything got so corporate, I would say, and about making money. And
right.
Yeah, I don't know. Even myself as a developer, like I sometimes regret that I didn't live through like the 90s and 2000s of game development. Because I don't know, it feels so much fun to use how could I say some things I see a lot is that the more restrictions you have, the more creative you can be. And now like tools are so powerful that it kind of breaks that. But a lot of old games had so many restrictions to respect that sometimes it kind of forced some creative situations. And yeah, I feel like indie games really kind of repeat that. And yeah. I could go on very long on this, so I'll stop.
Oh, no, feel free. I mean, it looks like we got people who are interested. Well, I mean, RCX is... Yeah, we always make jokes about my clickbait here because I do some really fucking awful clickbait. Look, here's the thing. When I don't do the weird clickbait, like, I get like 50 views. And then when I do the weird clickbait, I get like 200, 250 views. Like, it works. I don't like doing it. I don't want to do it. But as long as it keeps working, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, I get it, and then people like tune in and see that we actually don't say what the title says. So
yeah. So, anyways, but yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned. There's been a recent controversy about indie games because of the Game Awards. That's over now. I didn't watch it, but
yeah.
I'm sure you heard about the whole Nexon Dave the Diver thing. Dave the Diver has this like indie energy to it. It's like this quirky little game with pixel art with a weird idea. And so it's like, yeah, it's got indie vibes to it. But then on the other hand, it was funded by a major publisher. So what's your opinion on this?
I don't know like the details of this situation, so I might be wrong. But like even myself as a developer, like we're still looking for a publisher actually. And the thing is like making games is incredibly expensive, like depending on the quality you aim for. So I feel like, I mean, you can, like, for example, Retrigger is almost Retrigger 2, sorry, is like a surprisingly like a budget of around 2 million, and like it feels like a lot, but it really isn't actually when you like do some analysis of the costs. And the thing is like the value of money is very different between like you as an individual and a company, because yeah, as soon as you like have as many as just 5 people like that you have to pay for, like, I don't know, 2.5 years, it really goes up very, very fast. And again, the publisher, like, it depends on each publisher, but usually they don't have that big of an end in the development. It's more like, well, we have the money, we want to help you make the game. And so, but it's still like the small team that actually develops the game.
Right.
So I would say like it's still an indie, because an awful lot of like indie gems have been funded by like bigger companies, but then the actual developer is like a little is like a little team of maybe 2 to like 20 people, and yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I don't know, I hadn't even thought about that, but it's so obvious that, like, yeah, of course now a lot of indie games still get a publisher. I don't know if, I also don't really know the full, like, controversy behind this.
Yeah, I don't either, so maybe I'm just saying shit right now.
Yeah. Well, all I know is that there were people making a fuss about Dave the Diver being the like in the category for like best indie game, when Nexon they publish like a ton of like MMOs and other big names. I think they're like a big Korean publishing company. Right. And I think the other thing about Dave the Diver 2 was that actually I think it was developed by an in-house team at Nexon as well. So I don't know. Anyways,
yeah, my feeling with the Game Awards was more about like the fact that some awards and like for example all the indie awards were just like almost a bullet point of like, oh, congrats, is this game, but then they don't even get the chance to get on the stage and like see their faces and hear their story. But then again, like even people that got on stage got only 30 seconds, and that's another whole can of worms. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's really disheartening to me to see that indies that pour like so much risk and sweat, blood, and tears into their projects don't even get their, I would say, 30 seconds of fame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone in chat is surprised by the price of the game that we're currently viewing right now. This is a $2 million game.
Oh no, not this one. This one was like 100K, I would say.
Oh, okay.
But,
even still 100K.
Yeah.
Like,
but,
what RCX is saying here, RPG Maker developers are so spoiled after hearing that price. Like, even with 100K, right? Like, Mr. Orc, who's in chat, his game, I think he said he's around 2K. I haven't really run the numbers on my game, but I would probably say I'm close to that as well. So, like, yeah, we're like, even for this your 100K game, that's like a distant dream for us. This is what I was saying earlier in our private chat, where it's like most of the indie developers I talk to, you're on such a different level from us, right?
Yeah.
It's not apples to apples when I share my own advice. You're in a completely different league than us.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There are so many different factors, and like if you work alone, well, we've seen multiple times like freaking awesome games can be made, but then again, like there's so many other factors as well of like how much time you can put into that project. Like if you have a full-time job, it's hard to juggle the two.
Yes, I am well aware.
Yeah. So there's that. There's also like I said, the experience that you have in making games. Like I've been fortunate to work on AAA games before, and so I have that experience. And I went to a very great school about like earning a bachelor in making video games. But yeah, I mean, it really depends what you're aiming for, and doing games alone is totally fine, and you can achieve great results. But yeah, it honestly, like any game, like be it very very small indie, AA or like AAA. Honestly, it's always a miracle that a game ships at all. So I think that pictures well how difficult it can be, even for very small projects. So honestly, like I would say to anyone creating games, like props to you, because it's not easy to do. And yes, it's gonna be on varying degrees of quality, but I mean, as long as you can express yourself, I think it's already such a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're definitely speaking the truth there, man. You hit home when you talked about, you know, developing a game when you have a full-time job. Hi, that's me. I have 2 jobs actually.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so you know, like I'm lucky if I get like 3 hours of development time a week. So it kind of sucks, honestly.
No, I 100% get it.
Yeah, it's so funny because like, so I have, as I'm sure a lot of us do, I know you can definitely relate to this, my dream game, my magnum opus, right? And when I had finished developing my first little like demo into RPG Maker, I had started like playing around with other game engines. You know, I had practiced a little bit with Unity, but like after my first failed attempt, I was like, no, I'm gonna try again and see if I can learn it. I didn't. Anyways, it sounds like it's probably good that I didn't stick with Unity anyway, since that ship is sinking. But anyways, so, you know, I was like, okay, I can't find a game engine, but I have these cool ideas that I think I can make in RPG Maker, and I just want to test to see if these are fun ideas for a game. So that's kind of how my whole project even started in the first place, was just not a very serious tech demo for some ideas. And unfortunately, it's just like the more and more I started working on it, it's like the scope of like the actual content that's in the game never changed, because I'm pretty well aware of like how scope creep can easily make a game never finish. However, there is a different type of scope creep that I didn't account for. The content hasn't really changed. However, the expectation in the polish, the scope there in polish has changed greatly, because somewhere along the way, a switch flipped in my head where I said, you know what? I don't think I really want to just make this a free game that I dump on itch. I actually want to try selling this. And when that switch flipped, I realized, well, I can't let this jank just sit in my game if it's going to be commercial.
Yeah, and that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. So.
No, I totally get it, honestly, and it's a difficult balance to strike, honestly. And Yeah, and also another thing of like working alone is like we kind of underestimate also like the value of our work. Like I mean financially because like even
Yes.
myself making Retrigger 2, like I never gave myself a salary, so like it's been 3 years that I didn't really have money coming in. I was just pouring it into development. Um, and yeah, and like I said, it's there that you see like the value of things, and at some point I really had to force myself also to kind of change mentality. What I mean by that is like at first, like because I can make Red Trigger 2 by myself, it will take me like 10 years, but I can do it. But that's the thing is like sometimes you have to depending on your resources and what you want to do. At some point, I had to like realize that my time is money as well, and sometimes it's better to just hire someone to like for a small contract, for example, to actually make I don't know like a rig of a character, so that it takes maybe 10 hours and a couple of $100s instead of you spending 2 weeks on it. And so there's value in that, and it's easy to like underestimate that. And so
Yeah.
like even super like hobbyist developers, like it's easy to forget that what we pour into all this time, there's a value to it. And and yeah, so it's easy to say like, oh yeah, my project cost $0 because I made it all by myself, but it's not actually it's not exactly true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually, first of all, Puffy. Puffy is a new chatter here. I wonder if Puffy has come from your Discord. It would be nice to have some new audience here.
I don't know.
Mr. Orc says, every RPG maker, developer, I do everything myself.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I see that a lot. I was just about to mention Mr. Orc. Actually, I think he's come to realize the same thing. He started offering his service commercially as a mapper. So basically, he can just people, request his skills to make a map for him for their game, and apparently he's done really quite well for himself. And that's helping fund his game now as he makes maps for other games and sells that, and then uses that money to fund his game that he's making.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's exactly that kind of the people who are doing the maps. Like the tools in RPG Maker for making a map, it's nowhere near as complex as like setting up a 3D models rig. The thing you were mentioning.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple stuff. At its very basic, at its very essence, right? It's pretty simple. But making it look nice and stuff like that, it takes time. It's level design, and in order to make the levels function the way that you want, it takes time and effort and thought. And I think there's a lot of people who just like, I'd rather focus on something else in my game. They can do it, sure, but
Yeah, and like I said, it really depends on your goals. Like, if you just want it to be like your own little project, that's totally okay as well. But yeah, me, like, yeah, of course, the last 3 years have been a lot of learning experience of like, managing a studio and a company, and you realize a lot of things of like, just like that of. Sometimes it's better, yeah, to outsource things, and it's just for the better for everyone. But then again, I mean, yeah, there's so many factors in this. Like it depends also if you can afford it.
Right.
But my point is more the fact that like we tend to underestimate our own value in making games, and like yes, you can say, well, it didn't cost me nothing, but actually it took you, I don't know, 5 years to make. Well, that's something of value. So yeah, just a reminder.
Let's see what Orc said here. I've always been an advocate for outsourcing work in which you don't excel or don't enjoy. Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I unfortunately have a really limited budget, and I am not good at doing art or programming. So, you know, I have 2 people who are assisting me with those parts. You know, the art that I used on the thumbnail, the girl is by a local artist here. She's super nice. I've been working with her for a year now, but it is like totally contract based. It's not an employee kind of thing.
Oh, well, honestly, on my side, like we never actually got an employee. It was all contract work because every time it was about like 3 months, and then we reevaluate how much we have in the budget left and see if we can still afford it or not.
That's the fun stuff. Administrative work is my favorite.
Yay! Yeah, that's another part of it. Is like I know. I hear sometimes like people like be like, oh, I want my own studio and everything, but sometimes they mean more that they want to be like a creative director at the company instead of like having their own studio, because honestly, like during the development of my games, there's been sometimes months that I didn't even touch my own game and was more taking care of other stuff, of like attending to events to market the game, and then talking, like, for example, to publishers to pitch the project, and doing administrative work, and like, of course, doing all the accounting stuff as well. So it's, yeah, as a studio head, you do wear an awful lot of hats depending on how many people you have on your team. And yeah, you have to be ready to kind of relegate and not spend as much time developing as you might think. So yeah, it really depends on the goal of the person.
Yeah. I know how that is. My second job, I can't provide too many details because this is the internet and y'all are weird. But my other job is actually more of a self-run business. It's small time. Oh no, I guess we'll be replaying the videos again. Anyways.
Oh yeah.
It's a small business. I don't have any employees. It's run entirely by myself, and I can tell you, my absolute least favorite thing is all of the, bureaucratic administrative shit. It's just like, I don't want to waste time with this. I just want to either do the work that I'm doing this business for. I started this business for, or I don't know, spend that time where I'm balancing fucking checkbooks and checking all of the receipts that I've received from customers and making sure things are, lining up. Yep. I would rather just spend that time making my game.
Yeah, well, that I totally understand that, and that's basically what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the thing. Again, like I said, it depends on your resources, but I know that, like, next time I kind of revive my own studio, I'm gonna try to have one person taking care of all that stuff, so that I can really focus on where my talent is, instead of like wasting time doing this thing that I just like you don't like doing, and it really eats up a lot of time. So yeah. Hang on, my goodness, I have fallen behind on chat. Well, let's see. Wrath of Wood said, I make 3D models for Nerd Mansion and then buy lunch. Always good to hear, Wrath. RCX has a lot to say here. My advocate is for people to properly prototype assets and concepts so other people can help you. Yeah, that's true.
Because I'm not an artist, but I have sick-ass concepts. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love, my artist always gets a kick out of, which I'm not going to be showing on stream. My artist always gets a kick out of my, little doodles that I send her. Like, I want it to look like this. She's always like, I understand what you're talking about, and I also understand why you're hiring me.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think it's also a strength to know your strengths and weaknesses and be aware of them, and that's another thing actually of like being, for example, a creative director or director of anything creative is it's really like you can. I've seen a lot of developers, for example, in AAA that like they have, for example, like a level designer role, and they're like really good at what they do, but then once they like rise through the ranks and get the director position, you see that they really struggle, and that's because like it's a whole different skill, managing a team and be able to convey your ideas well and be able to be extremely clear in what you have in mind, and yeah, it's it's something that can surprise a lot of people at first of like, well, it seems so much clear in my head. How did they understand something completely different? But it's really a skill that you develop over time to convey your ideas.
I think I was fortunate that before I started like really doing game design stuff, before I really started my own like serious project now, I had worked on my music album before, and I was coordinating with musicians from all over the world to, you know, make contributions to the album. So, you know, it helped give me like some idea of like what it's like to like, you know, try to manage a project and try to keep it in scope and try to get people to understand what the fuck I'm talking about. So, so I think I've done pretty well. You know, I feel like I'm pretty good when it comes to managing the project, but I could also be completely full of shit because I haven't actually finished my real game, so who knows? Let me continue to get caught up on chat. Tritium, nice to have you here. And RCX said, did I finish the game? I imagine you're talking about Retrigger. Yes, actually, to spoil the illusion here, you may notice that I am controlling the game without using my hands right now. It's not because I'm telepathic. I played this earlier today to capture some footage. I don't want to play the game while I'm having this lovely chat with Max here, because it's hard to concentrate on talking and playing a game at the same time. So this footage is pre-recorded so I can give Max 100% of my attention. Or 90% of it, and then the other 10% is on chat. But anyways.
Yeah, and it is a short game, so
yeah,
it's normal that in what's been an hour talking that you finished the game.
Oh wow, have we already done an hour? Man, I'm honestly kind of impressed. I sort of figured that it might only be an hour. I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I'm having fun. You're a great guy. I like chatting with you.
Ah, thanks. And
you know,
chatting with you too.
Yeah. Oh, come on, man. You don't need the brown nose. No, but like a lot of the people, not everyone, all right? We got some pretty tough people in the crowd. And in fact, actually, Mr. Orc is impossible to please when it comes to games. I don't think he likes any games. I'm pretty sure he hates every single game under the sun. But there's a lot of people in my audience who are like, wow, Retrigger's really cool. And we're like, hey, keep us posted on the status of that game and its Kickstarter. So yeah, I was kind of like just the guy in my Discord who was like, whenever you would post something in your Discord, I would basically just copy and paste it into mine and be like, here's the current news, what's going on. When everyone was sad when you announced that the Kickstarter was canceled, oh yeah, I announced that in my Discord, and we had a bunch of sad faces there too. So we have
again, thanks for sharing. It's really kind of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good game. It has the potential. It is short, and the current, remaster version, as I said to you earlier in the private messages, it performs like dirt.
Yeah, I'm well aware.
So, like, what we're looking right now for everyone who's watching the stream, this is the original student version, 2016 version that young Max made a long time ago, before the world changed because of a virus. And honestly, I replayed that version just for this stream, just to capture the footage. And when I was replaying it, I actually found, and I know this is probably hard to hear, but I kind of preferred this version over the new version. The lighting, I get it, is not the prettiest lighting. It's very flat and doesn't have a lot of detail. But what I like about it is that it's very, very obvious what the things are that you can interact with. There's no shadows that are like masking important, you know, puzzle elements or anything like that. There's no weird glares or anything that might make it hard to read what's going on. So, first of all, I know the lighting is not the prettiest, but I like it because it's very, very functional. And also, it performs well, so I can actually aim and like jump and do stuff. So
yeah, well, I mean, later in this discussion we can get into the reasons why it performs like shit. So yeah.
Sure. I mean, let me get caught up on chat, and I mean, and after we get caught up on chat, we can just jump right into that. Let's see. Wrathwood said, look like this, but better in every way. Oh, yeah, he's talking about, how to manage.
Yeah, the drawing.
Yeah. I managed a project once. It was awful. All right. RCX says, oh, I wasn't looking at your hands. I just thought you turned into a god gamer when I wasn't looking. No, you see, I can play games a lot better when I'm not talking to chat. When I'm actually just focusing on a game, I'm actually not a 100% terrible gamer. I'm semi-competent when it comes to gaming. It's just, it's so hard to like split your attention between chat and a game. So, yeah, I didn't turn into a god gamer. It's just, when I played this, I was just playing it by myself without any sort of chat. So, anyways, he was pleased with the game he was playing last night. Oh, Orc was? That's rare. Orc is very rarely. I think he plays a MOBA, I think. I don't remember if it's League of Legends or something. I think that's like the only game that he plays. He was just recently talking about liking the Dark Souls games too. I think those are the only two games he likes. I don't even know why he makes games.
Well, I mean, playing games and making games is very different.
Yeah, it's definitely true. You know he lying. Anyways, but yeah, now that we're caught up on chat, sure. Because there's a lot of people who were here last time who watched me play Retrigger Remastered, and it performed like dirt. I'm not saying my system is, you know, like super high end. It's pretty old at this point. It's a GTX 1080 Ti and Ryzen 2700X, I think. So, you know, we're talking like hardware before the pandemic. No ray tracing here for me. So it's not super duper high quality stuff, but it's still, you know, like 1080 Ti was flagship a long time ago and holds up pretty well in a lot of AAA games still today. So it was kind of surprising when I played Retrigger and it performs terribly. I could barely get above 40 frames per second, even with a lot of the settings lowered. So, yeah, if you want to go ahead and if you have a story behind why that is, let us know.
I mean, it's more the fact that developing for PC is the reflex that people think of is like, oh, it's way easier to develop for PC because like you're working on PC and your game runs on PC. But the fact is, if you, for example, develop a game on console, the benchmark and like the performance is like, it's one thing. It's very like cut and dry of like, oh, it has to run on this specific hardware. But on PC, like you get so like an almost infinite combination of different hardware, and sometimes you can have good hardware, but it's like the interaction between those that can affect like the performance, and so it's very hard to like kind of balance that. So that there's that first. The second thing is like the remake is made in Unreal Engine 5 and it's still quite new, so there's a lot of things that need improvement on, especially like since we use the new Lumen technology, it's like super power hungry. But the main thing is just timing and time. It's really like we were kind of balancing our budget and all that, and we were going to Gamescom to basically show the game and try to convince the publisher to fund the sequel, which is way bigger and more ambitious. But to kind of respect the timeline there, what we wanted to do is actually to have the remake out so that we can show numbers and show that we shipped something, because that's something that came up a couple of times with publishers of like, well, you're a new team, like how do we know you can ship and all that. So we use that remake for many things to prove to publishers. But the mistake was that we had to have something to show for Gamescom, and we preferred to have like the game released so we can actually show numbers of the performance and all that. Of course, we all know how that turned out as well. Like it's probably the worst performance numbers we could have had for reasons outside of our control. But the thing is, like we kind of rushed the release because we wanted it to be released in time for Gamescom, and like I said, the budget was diminishing fast, and so if it was only up to me, I would have taken a good month more of development to really optimize the game, but we didn't get to do that, and after that, basically, well, we know what happened, and sadly couldn't keep my team, and after that I've been like doing small contract work to kind of refill the coffers since it's been 3 years just on my own money developing, and yeah, so it's like exterior reasons that we just didn't get the time, sadly, to optimize, and yeah, that of course affects the end quality of the results. So the game actually can perform very well on some systems, like if they have the same how could I say it, like the same hardware as my own PC, but on others it doesn't do that, just like yours, but clearly we would have needed more time to polish all of that.
Yeah. So all my RPG Maker devs, y'all need to fucking appreciate this. The thing is with RPG Maker is that, especially the modern engines, it still performs poorly, but like the poor performance is consistent across every computer because it's just a web browser. It's a packaged web browser, and it runs the game in the web browser. It's HTML5 based. So all of my RPG Maker devs here should really fucking appreciate that you don't have to spend all that effort like trying to optimize for all the different hardware, because we have Chromium. We have basically the power of Google behind us, making sure that it doesn't matter what hardware people are using, our game will run basically no matter what.
Yeah,
so
that's very true, and that's basically the equivalent of, like I said, to developing on console, where it's like it's one thing and it runs no matter what. But then when you use some things that's not I forget the word, but like it's not uniform, then it gets messy really quick. So it's it's quite a complex thing
Yeah.
to balance rendering and like the performance of a game when you have such wild different setups. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think, it's been a while since the last time I looked at, like, Steam charts, but, they do the hardware survey, like, once every year, and it kind of shows, like, what the current popular cards are that a lot of people are using. I think for the longest time, it was, like, the 970, the GTX 970 was, like, took the top slot. Like, well into, like, the 20 series years, maybe even the 30 series years. You still had people rocking this graphics card from, I don't know, what was it, like 2016, I think. So it's just crazy. I'm sure now I think it's been replaced. I think it's like the, what do they call it? It had a weird name. It's like 1660, I think. It was a cheap, high-performing card without all the RTX stuff. And I think that wound up taking over the 970, but even still, like, the 970 remained a common card for PC hardware. The point is just that, like, you have hardware that's almost a decade old that people are still rocking, plus every generation in between since then and now, basically. So yeah, it's hard to optimize for all of that.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to choose your battles as well, of like, well, for example, depending on what you aim for with your game, sometimes you have kind of to sacrifice those players, sadly, and be like, well, my game is supposed to be like run on a kind of powerful machine. So yeah, there's decisions involved in that, of course, as well. But yeah, all that to say that it's a very complex subject very quickly, and you almost have to have an expert on it to really make sure that it runs well. And that's the thing with AAA games, like for example, it can seem like they're a high quality games visually and all that, and they're power hungry, but behind them there's a whole team that basically their full-time job is to make sure that it runs on as many hardware as possible. But indie teams don't have that resource, sadly. So yeah, that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. Let me get caught up on chat here. Zola's night. Okay, yeah. I don't like turn-based games and party RPGs, and here I am making a turn. Yeah, that's Orc for you. Doesn't like turn-based games, doesn't like party RPGs, and yet that's the game he's making because he uses the same engine that I use that's built for making those kind of games. Let's see. RCX says developing on PC. Let me design hotkeys for everything. I even let you change controls in combat, and nobody else does that, even in AAA games. Yeah. This is actually, so this is kind of going into, like, I guess you could say, RPG Maker culture. At least here on this channel, one thing I often talk about is, like, I've grown up mostly as a PC gamer. I used to be kind of like an Xbox kid, console gamer for a long time. Actually, I was a console gamer up until the 360 era. And the whole Red Rings thing, I went through like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 different Xbox 360s. And after like my last one, I was just like, I'm fucking done with consoles and just have been a PC gamer ever since. And so it's just so weird because when I came to RPG Maker, I was so surprised that this game engine, like, I told you it's like out of the box, ready to make, a pretty standard, Final Fantasy game. And yet, despite this engine being released in the year of our Lord, the 2010s, it feels archaic. It feels like it's still out of the fucking 90s. I often complain about, like, developers. I play these games that are built in RPG Maker, and they can't even implement rebindable keys in their game. And it's frustrating because there's no programming involved with it because a major developer who's in the community has made free plugins for the engine that you can just drag and drop into the engine and have that functionality. It takes no knowledge, no experience other than dragging, dropping, and turning on the function. And yet there are just so many lazy developers who just don't put it in. I just don't get it.
But anyways, do they know that it exists?
They yes, because this developer who made those plugins is like considered basically necessary for the game engine. Because the game engine, again, having all these archaic designs in it, this developer made plugins that like patches a lot of stuff in the engine, makes a lot of things feel more modern and stuff. And it's all free and basically considered a necessity if you're making a game. Everyone has to download it and they see it there. It's in the same folder that they download. And then the developers still go on and ignore it. Look, someone is even naming the file by name in my chat. Yep, key config. My God. Drag, drop, turn on. It's that simple. Anyways, that's what RCX is talking about. He's talking about designing hotkeys for everything, letting you change controls in combat. Yeah, all this stuff. Anyway, sorry, that was a rant. I give this rant every time because it drives me nuts. It is so simple for this engine. We're not talking about Unity or Unreal where you basically have to design this shit from scratch. I mean, I'm sure there are asset libraries that probably do it, but, you know, still, like, I feel like RPG Maker probably makes it dummy-proof, and yet there are still dummies. Anyways.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes. Anyway, sorry, let me get caught up here. Had to do my rant.
No problem.
Wrath of Wood says, when I used Unity, it got bogged down with rendering options. There was a new way to run things every update. Yeah, that was, honestly, that was one of the biggest challenge for me when I was using Unity is that like it constantly got updated, and then it's like when you use the Unity hub, it like asks you what version do you want to launch with it. It's like, I don't fucking know, the recent one, I think. Why are you asking me this? Why is this so complicated? I can't even launch the software without having to feel like a fucking computer scientist. Anyways, Mixus, which is a new chatter. Thanks for being here. Mixus, when you release the remaster. Oh, this is a question for you. Oh, we have a chatter.
I know Mixus. He's a
Oh, he is from your Discord.
Player.
Hey, we got cross-pollination here. We got some folks from my Discord. We got some folks from your Discord. Look, we're having a good time here. Did you answer this question? Let's see. What does it say? When you released the remaster, did you know beforehand that the performance would be a big deal for a lot of players, or was it a complete surprise? Why don't you go ahead and answer that, Mr. Retrigger?
Yeah, well, first of all, hi Mixes, thanks for the question. Yeah, I would say I think it's like in the middle of the two options. Like I knew that we didn't get to optimize, sadly, and so I knew that like clearly we could have the game run way better if we had some time to develop, well, basically polish the game. So I knew in advance that there would be issues, but I didn't think it would be, I would say, that bad. But yeah, like I said, whenever I can find the time now with basically I'm doing like small contract work for now, and then I'm soon gonna apply to smaller studios to kind of refill the coffers once again. But whenever I find the time, I fix bugs and try to optimize the game, but of course that takes a lot of time. So hopefully that gets there sooner than later. But yeah, I'm sorry for that that issue at the moment. It's really unfortunate. I really wish things could be different on that front, honestly. But yeah, that's the reality of having to pay bills and develop games. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even mention this earlier. That's on that note of like performance in the remaster. This is one of the other reasons why I think I prefer the original version too. Is it's surprisingly polished for a student project. I've played several student projects on my streams before, and like they're fine. They're clearly by student projects, and I can see the effort in them. But they also come with their fair share of jank. I am genuinely surprised with the amount of polish and care that was put into the original version. And it's kind of disappointing, the amount of just weird jank. Like, hang on, let me pause this right here in the video. Like, this is polish, right? It's not going to ruin the game, but it does look just not great. Like, the font contrast and stuff. This is not the best example, but there's somewhere where, like, the font contrast with the background is like barely visible. These checkboxes are like really blurry.
Yeah.
When you have the bloom on, these buttons are like luminescent. But when you turn the bloom off, they look like basically normal buttons. That's just to say, like, it's no big deal. I'm just pointing this out because it's like it's clearly shows that it's nowhere near as polished as the student game. Now, I realize there's just a lot more moving parts to the remastered version, but it's just that I don't know, the remake is a little bit janky. And the old
and like I said, I fully agree with this. Like, it's all things that I look at and I'm just like, I wish I had the time to fix all that, because I totally agree with all that.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's see. Tritium says not for Ace. He's talking about the keyboard control thing. But yeah, here's the thing with Ace. Ace is one of the old versions of RPG Maker, and it's pretty old now at this point. When did it release? Like 2009? Like, it performs poorly on a lot of PCs too. I've basically made it a rule on this channel that unless a developer submits a VX Ace game to me, I'm not going to just pick random VX Ace games, because it always causes problem with the streams. They like try to do this like exclusive window mode, where because they do that exclusive window mode, it like tries to take over my desktop. It starts minimizing all of my windows. And anyways, we don't count Ace here, Tritium. Ace is old. No one cares about it anymore. Anyways, RCX says you actually get less functions than a typical NES, Super Nintendo era Final Fantasy, by the way. Yeah, he's talking about RPG Makers. Yeah, you are kind of right about that. I think it's really the amount of functions that you have in RPG Maker are limited because it's trying to be a generic out-of-the-box RPG. It's not really trying to be any specific Final Fantasy or any other JRPG of the NES era. It's just a generic JRPG, and therefore it doesn't want to have any very specific functions built into it. Besides, we all know we shouldn't let developers have those generic built-in functions anyways, because then it gives them an excuse to not actually put time into developing their game. And I don't know, Max, how familiar you are with RPG Maker, but it has a terrible stigma, and this is thanks to Steam Greenlight. Do you know anything about its stigma?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, so and the reason why I know this is true is because of myself, actually. And I know I'm not the only one who felt this way. It gets talked a lot about on the RPG Maker forums itself. RPG Maker, the one of the more recent versions, MV, got released right around the time that Steam Greenlight was still a thing. You're familiar with Steam Greenlight, right?
Yeah, the first game got approved through the Steam Greenlight like right before it shut down. Honestly, I wish it was still a thing, Greenlight.
Yeah.
To really, because right now the store, like you just need $100 and the approval of Steam, and it's really saturates the market, sadly.
Yeah, so, well, speaking of saturating the market, that's exactly what happened. Because RPG Maker, you know, it's a game in a box, right? It comes with a bunch of free assets already installed. It's basically designed out of the box. I mean, it's a very generic, simple design out of the box. You just make a few maps. It even has a map generator, so you could just theoretically just click the map generate button a few times. It makes disgustingly ugly maps, but you know, hey, if you're a shoddy developer, you can do that. And that's exactly what happened during the Steam Greenlight. Is you had a bunch of shoddy developers basically doing asset flips with RPG Maker, flooded Steam Greenlight with them, and then all the people started catching on. Oh, all this shit comes out of this one engine. And then the Stigma formed. It's like everyone started thinking, oh, this engine, this game engine, can only produce hot garbage, cut and paste games.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people. For the longest time, I was like, RPG Maker is just that one garbage engine. I was talking to one of my coworkers and friends who used to work in programming, and I was telling him about my magnum opus game design, and he's like, oh, that's kind of like a JRPG. Why don't you just get RPG Maker? And I scoffed. I was like, huh? RPG Maker? What? That engine? That's like the shovelware engine, right? And he's like, no, you can do a lot of shit with it. And I was just like, all right, I guess I'll give it a try. It was cheap, and I gave it a try, and I was like, oh, I was completely wrong about this. So this is why I know there are definitely other people with that mindset, because had I not actually gotten into game development using the engine, actually giving the engine a legitimate try, I probably would have gone on forever with the RPG Maker game tag blocked on Steam. Which, by the way, super unfair that RPG Maker is the only game engine that gets its own tag. Like, you don't see other games tagged. You don't see other games tagged with, like, Unity game or anything like that. That's how far this Stigma goes, is we get our own tag when we're built in that engine.
Gosh, that's really unfortunate,
Yeah, it is. Anyways, why did I start ranting about that? I feel very personal about that. I think we all do. Anyways.
And honestly, it's legit, so yeah.
Yeah.
I get the frustration.
Yeah. Let's see. I just started. Yeah, okay. Wrath of Woods, yeah. Don't you dare give NA a game to play without rebindable keys or else. Okay, well, this is all the way back at my rebindable keys rant. Yep, that's right. You better have fucking rebindable keys in your game. Look, no, I'm not gonna go off on the rant again. I'm about to go off on the rant again. No. I'll save it. You guys have heard it plenty. Anyways, yep, key config is one free Yawnfly plugins, so there's not even a paywall blocking people with it. Yeah, exactly. Also ships with the engine. Yes, that's right. There's a deal when you download the folder. When you download the game engine, it comes with like a DLC folder with a bunch of like free plugins. And yeah, that keyboard config plugin also comes with the fucking engine. If you open the damn folder up, the keyboard config plugin is literally right there. Anyway, sorry, I'm gonna go off on the rant again. I'm gonna do it. Anyways, we got another question for you. RCX says, for Max, the stigma is very real because there are people... Oh, it's not a question. Never mind. There are people releasing games with completely default assets on Steam. Yep. Yeah. That's the thing is, like... that's what I was saying, is it looked like asset flips because everyone's using the same default assets that come with the engine. So they're seeing the same characters, the same tile sets, the same everything... in all of these Greenlight games, which is how people started, connecting the dots and was like, oh, it's from that one engine.
Yeah, and I think what happened is probably that makes it even more unfortunate is that I think that people behind RPG Maker made that defaulting as a tool to show oh, here's what you can do, and it's being a starting point. But the danger with that is that, people just change a couple things here and there, but it's still the same basics thing. So, while from what I know, I'm not an expert on this, but I think Unity and Unreal don't come with that kind of like functional game being made at first, so that's why it happens, especially with RPG Maker, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the danger of like adding this kind of content.
Yeah.
But like clearly it started as a good intention from them, but yeah, it led to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and with like Unity's case, I mean, I don't know about now because I haven't used it in a while, but I know they have like a free made by Unity asset pack that comes with like a character controller, some simple assets that you can use, stuff like that. But number one, it is like very basic. It's basically just enough to kind of show off like, here's what a sandboxed or a white box, gray box game might look like. And that's really all it's there for. It's great for tutorials. Some of the tutorials I followed recommended downloading those. But yeah, like I said, first of all, you have to download it from the asset store. So you at least have to put in the effort to navigate to the asset store. And as I have already mentioned with the fucking keyboard config thing, if it's not just default installed in the damn engine, 90% of the people won't even fucking navigate to your asset store. God damn it. Anyways. So, yeah. So, you know, I think, first of all, that already kind of steers away a lot of the jokers who are just you know, asset flipping those base free assets that come with Unity. And then the second thing is that they're not really very complete anyways. It's just like the bare essential for sandboxing a game, and that's it.
Yeah, it's really the same thing with Unreal. Like you can you have kind of prefabs of like for example, you want to make a racing game or you want to make a first person and things like that. It's like pre-made. Think about it. But it's so basic. Like there's no really gameplay there. It's just like a kind of a blank map that you can just go around. So you couldn't really ship that as a game.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's get caught up on chat here. RCX says, oh, and in continuation, and asking like $12 for a game that was made in a week at most. Yeah, and we see this a lot. If you can see this. If you like filter Steam by like JRPG or RPG, or actually, hell, there's the RPG Maker tag. Like I said, we're the only game engine that gets our own tag. You can sort by RPG Maker games on Steam, and then you can just sort by newest, and you'll see a handful of games that, you know, I know you're not familiar with the default assets, but I promise you, after you look through like 3 games, you're gonna start seeing familiar pieces in the screenshots alone. And these jokers are sitting there asking for like $25 for their game, and it's like, what are you doing? You built this game in a week.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah. RCX says we've seen real examples of it multiple times. Yeah, even on this stream. On these streams that I do, we've seen examples of this multiple times for sure.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I think that's basically what happened with my problem with Steam. It's like they kind of put me into that basket of a shoddy developer that just tried to sell his game either multiple times or things like that. And sadly, it's because those situations do exist that I was put into that. So yeah. Yeah,
and I definitely want to actually get into that too, because not everyone in my live stream is in my Discord, so they don't always hear all of the news about that I share about your game. So I definitely want you to tell your story about what happened with Retrigger and Retrigger 2 and all of that stuff with Steam. Let's get caught up on chat first. Let me try not to get distracted with too many rants about having rebindable keys. Anyways, Once you know RPG Maker's strengths, it's good stuff for a first engine. Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's a very powerful engine. Because the nice thing about it is the whole like back end, like the rendering aspects, just the way that the whole engine works is completely open. So you can literally make the engine do whatever you want if you're smart enough. So yeah, that's the thing, is it can be very powerful, but you gotta put in the effort. Yep, and as Wrathwood says, not all RM games. Yeah, not all RPG Maker games. Orc says, and WASD movement turned on by default. Yes, WASD. This is the thing with, I told you archaic design with the engine. The default controls are arrow keys. Like, it's a game, out of the 90s. And it drives me nuts, because every modern PC game, we default to WASD. Let's see. Wrathwood says, "What's with all these Herald Knock Knock game?" Okay, sorry. That's too deep cut of lore. I don't even want to have to teach Max what any of that means. So never mind. Just pretend he didn't say that. Yeah, the stink with Retrigger even reached a prominent 1 million view streamer. Yeah, that's right. Well, maybe. Maybe. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I'm not entirely convinced this is entirely related to that live streamer. There's Vinny Vinesauce, who apparently maybe talked about your game. He never referenced your game by name, which is why I am not 100% sure this news is actually related to Retrigger or not. Do you know anything about what Vinny Vinesauce said about?
No, I'm curious to see about that.
So here's one reason why I'm also not entirely convinced it isn't about your game, because coincidentally, I think around the same time of that stream, there was another nonsense Twitter controversy. I don't use this fucking website, but anyways, there was some developer on there who was like complaining about how he had spent like 4 or 5 years, a long time making his game, and then he put it up for sale on Steam and had made like a total of $30 over like a year of its lifetime on Steam. And he was just basically complaining like, oh, it sucks, no one paid attention to the game I made. And for some reason, this like went viral on Twitter. And so the reason why I bring this up is that event, that viral moment of people like talking about, how hard it is as being an indie developer on Steam and not getting many sales and so forth, happened around the same time as when Mr. Vinesauce guy had talked about this indie developer and his troubles. So I don't know if he was directly... I don't know if it was Retrigger or not. Like I said, he never mentioned the game by name.
Yeah.
So, but basically, what he was talking about is he was saying that Mr. RCX might remember this better. He sent me the link to the video. I'm not subscribed to the guy, but he sent me the link to the video with the timestamp, and I watched it, but I don't really recall all the details. I think the guy was saying that this indie developer who's had trouble with their game sales had originally sent the game to this streamer, to Vinesauce. But he gets, hundreds of emails a day from 100 different other indie developers who are trying to get him to play their game on their stream because it's basically free marketing, right? And so he was basically saying that, he pretty much ignored it because the game didn't look that interesting. He has to, filter through all of these games that get submitted to him, and he he doesn't have a lot to go off of other than the screenshots, and if it doesn't look interesting in the screenshots, then he's not going to play it, or something like that. So, first of all, we can probably easily get to the bottom of this. Did you ever submit Retrigger to any streamers?
Nope, so that clears it.
Yeah, so...
But I'm still curious, after the stream, you can send me the link. I'm curious to hear what he had to say about it.
Mr. RCX, do you still have the link? Because it's gonna be so far back in our Discord chat, I don't know if I'd be able to fish it up. If you have the link, RCX, can you put it back in my... Can you just make it like one of the most recent messages in the Discord? Or if you're in the Retrigger Discord, I think Max's DMs are open, so just send him a message. He's a cool guy, he won't bite, I promise. So anyways, but yeah, I'll send that to you. I'm pretty sure it's not related to you since, like you said, you never submitted your game to any streamers. Like, the only reason why I played your game on stream was Steam has like the recently updated section on the store page of like games that you previously played, and I noticed, oh, well, damn, Retrigger. I was like, Retrigger, wasn't that like some like student game from like a long time ago that I played? Why the fuck is it getting updated now? And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, a whole remaster. Oh, that sounds cool. That sounds like something I can play on stream. And since, the update was given for free to anyone who played the original version, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, that's something that's content for my stream. So, I mean, that's why I played it. Max didn't give me a key for it. I had played the original version long ago.
Yep, yeah, so you got the game for free, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Mr. Orc says, teach Max the lore of the lands. There's some really weird, deep cut RPG Maker lore, because you get like a default, like I said, the game is ready to go basically out of the box. You get a default party, so they have to give your default party characters a name. So in RPG Maker MV, the like 2015 version, and probably the most popular version of the engine, the leader of the party was named Harold. So that's where the name was. God, what was it? Wrathwood said Harold Knock Knock Games average Steam user. Okay, God, this is such deep cut dumb lore. Why am I teaching you this? So now you know where the name Harold comes from. It's the leader of the party. The knock knock is just a really awful default sound that everyone uses as a map transfer whenever you step onto whatever tile it is that transfers you to the next map. I think the default transfer sound is this knock knock sound, and it just sounds terrible. So there you go. I'm sure that was well worth the time of explaining this. Are you happy, Orc? This is like this is like when you invite your coworker out with your friends. Your friends you've gone to school with your entire life, so you got all these like deep inside jokes because you've had all these funny moments that happened with you, and then you try explaining to your coworker what all these jokes mean, and it's just you get that awkward like sniff laugh out of it, the little release of air, like huh. What are people supposed to fucking say to this? Don't act like you got any other topics right now. I got plenty of topics. I got a whole fucking Google sheet that we have barely touched. Trust me, bro. I got plenty of topics for this stream, but I told Max that I just want to keep it chill and relaxed and just have fun. I'm not here to force any of these questions that I had prepared in advance. It's just if there's dead air and we need a topic, I got a Google Doc I can fall back on. So don't you give me shit, Orc. I got topics. Anyways, RCX says, and his argument is that he gets dozens of keys to play all sorts of indie games, so he has to feed with his eyes to know what to play. Yeah, that's talking about that streamer I was talking about. And then Tritium already left. It's too late to say goodbye, but I don't know. Goodbye anyways, Tritium. Thanks for joining. Well, then stop the umming and get out of here, man. Orc is impossible to please. Walk through forest path, knock knock. Yeah. All right. Anyways, so now that we have finally gotten all caught up here, and you have been enlightened on dumb RPG Maker lore that you are welcome to forget shortly after this stream. Can you explain the whole story behind, like, why was Retrigger... Well, let's start from the beginning, you know, like, why Retrigger, this 2016 student project, first of all, why did you even update it?
You mean with the remake?
Yeah. Why did you make the remake?
Yeah. So basically, so in 2016, like I said, I released my own game. It was my final student project at university called Retrigger. And after that, I worked for 4 years at Ubisoft, gaining AAA experience. So I worked on Assassin's Creed Origins and Valhalla. But then I always knew I wanted to do my own thing. So in 2020, I decided to make the jump and founded my own studio called Bold Spirit Game Studio. And our first project was actually to make a sequel that's like way more ambitious, way bigger than the original student game. And so we started with that, but then when we started pitching to publishers, we saw that the sentiment basically the feedback we got from multiple the publishers, some points came up often. So the first thing was the art style, which like is just good enough in the original to be thought as like a final product. But with the sequel, we wanted to basically have what you now see as the remake of Retrigger as in terms of graphics quality. So there's that. The other thing that they said is also like, well, your team is not proven, so is there a way that you can like prove to us that you can work as a team and ship? And the other thing was that they were like, well, we're usually like funding either new IPs or like if we do a sequel, usually we were involved with the first one, so they were kind of hesitant on that front. So me and my team, we thought about all that, and I was like, well, maybe something that would be clever to do is actually making a remake of the first game, because first of all, while developing the sequel, like the main character talks, but she didn't talk in the first one, so we kind of had to find ways in the storytelling to say why she didn't talk in the first game, and it was very messy. So I figured, well, why not just like do kind of a hard reset and basically rename the first game as Retrigger Prologue, because that's basically what it is. Like we saw, like the game lasts about an hour, while the full sequel is like, we estimate around 10 hours. And so we were like, well, that way it will change the perception of publishers of like, oh, it's the prologue, it's like a proof of concept. And then we have the full game that we renamed from Retrigger 2 to simply Retrigger. So that was a way to address that feedback. The other thing was like, well, now we can prove that we work as a team by making that smaller project and ship it. And also, like I said, it will fix all the issues that we had of like linking the first game to the second one in terms of lore and all that. So that seemed like the right way to go about it. I know that like in retrospect or hindsight, like it can look weird, but that's basically the logic that we had. And so what we did is in January of 2023, we asked the team to basically do that renaming. And the only thing I was worried about is like, well, that first student-free game, if people see that it's the same game as the remake, they will probably just go, oh, I'll just go with the free version. and I felt like, well, that's not the intended experience at this point. So, like, is there a way that we can kind of bury the old game but still have it available for people that prefer it? So I figured, well, let's just rename that first free game as Retrigger Prologue Alpha version, and then the remake just Retrigger Prologue. Again, in hindsight, like, I totally agree that it wasn't the right move. But still, all that to say that despite all this, Steam approved that in January. So I was like, oh, great, now we can focus on actually making that remake and shipping it. And as a company, like, once you have the green light, not to make a pun, from Steam, well, then you basically go with your company strategy, assuming that everything will be alright. But then in June, I just had a technical problem, and so I had to contact Steam support, and they said, oh yeah, we can fix that for you, but we noticed actually that you have 3 games called Retrigger something. Can you explain the relationship between those? So I'm like, well, it's been discussed before, but sure, yeah, no problem. So there was, like I said, the original called Retrigger, at this time Retrigger Prologue Alpha, then the remake called simply Retrigger Prologue, and the sequel called Retrigger. And so I explained the relationship between those, but clearly, like, Steam didn't really get the explanation. And after a bunch of back and forth, the thing to know as well is that the exchange, like, we had a reply every 24 hours, and it was always someone else responding. So it felt like always like starting from scratch, explaining the situation. And at some point, I got no answer, so I kind of bumped the Steam support ticket after 1 week, saying, listen, I just want to fix the issue I have with the release date, and basically get on with it because it's important for us. And we have, of course, energy to put in other places, like, for example, polishing the game. And so then they answered me and they said, well, we went ahead and we took down the page for the remake because we consider it to be like the same game as the original, so just update that version. Of course, there's a lot of issues with that because for the 6 months between January and June, we spent all our marketing effort to lead players to go to that new store page for the remake and say, like, wishlist it and all that. So all that effort was for nothing in the end because the game just the page just disappeared. So we lost all those wish lists, and we were like, well, it's a whole new game. Like, it's even made from scratch. It's like the only thing it has in common is that, yes, it's the same levels, but it's made by a whole team now that we have to pay and everything, so we want to sell that new game. And so they said, well, okay, well, you can update the old version and just change the price. What they didn't tell me with going with that is that this resets the review summary of your product. So we had 2,000 reviews and 90% positive score on Steam. So that all disappeared. Well, not completely. Like, if you scroll down the page, you can still see those 2,000 reviews. But the thing is, like, even myself as a consumer, like, I would open the page for Retrigger and see, like, oh, it's a 2016 game, and it has only, like, at the moment, like, around 30 reviews. I'd be like, oh, it's probably not very good. So that's unfortunate. And the other thing with this is, like I said, we lost the wishlist, but also, like, we didn't get the visibility of having a new game on Steam. So, like, a lot of players just, like, browse Steam for new games and all that. And I don't know if it's still a thing, but before, like, you had a guarantee that basically 1 million person would see at least your thumbnail on the store when your game releases. But like I said, now it's still labeled as a 2016 game. So just like, for example, you noticed that the game got updated, but like it's a very specific situation. A lot of players don't even know that the remake exists and that we released it. So what that did also is that, like I said, we didn't get the visibility that we deserved from making a new game. But the biggest point is also the fact that the 250,000 people that already downloaded the original game, they didn't have to buy the game again, because the free game, they downloaded it, and so it was associated with their Steam account. So they got that update for free. And like in the end, I'm glad that some people got it for free. Like they supported the game initially and all that, but it's still 250,000 potential sales that we could have made, especially since like it's a remake, and so it really had the fans in mind. So it's sales that we could have made, and the goal was to it was two things. By selling the remake, we could make some money to continue developing the sequel while we were still looking for funding from publishers, but at least we could still keep going. But the other thing is we created a Kickstarter for the sequel, and we kind of had in mind of creating a synergy there, of having, for example, the game released on Steam, so we get a lot of new eyes on it, and then on the main menu title screen, you would have a text that says, well, if you like that, you can support the sequel. So we were expecting a lot of traffic like coming from Steam, playing the game, and then people are like, well, I like that, I want to support whatever the developer does next. And so having traffic on the Kickstarter for that, but of course, like I said, since it just came out as an update to a 2016 game, basically almost nobody saw it. So the Kickstarter was also a flop there. So that basically led to us releasing that game. Like I said, it was a $100,000 production, and so we made a whopping like something like 35 sales at this point, which barely covered the cost at all. It's like the $200 in the end with the 30% Steam cut. So clearly, like we didn't get the money flow that we were expecting, and so that forced me to sadly let go of my team. And now I'm also like doing small contract work, and soon will be applying to AAA studios to refill the coffers. But it means like it's probably like 3 years where Retrigger 2 doesn't get made, sadly, and that we could have potentially still be doing right now if we had a normal release on Steam. And yeah, it just feels frustrating that it was incredibly arbitrary from Steam to just take down the page, because at that point they didn't even have a build for the game, so they just based their decision on like the screenshots and the trailers on the Steam page. And that's where you see like a big corporation like that, you're kind of at the mercy of them, because yeah, they almost have a monopoly on digital distribution on PC, and so if they block you from releasing your game as a new product, well, then you're basically screwed. And yeah, so that's why I'm sharing the story, because like, hey, I don't expect anything to change on my side, but I feel like it was a terrible thing to go through. It's no secret that let's say it was a very, very difficult summer to go through when this happened, because like it was 2 months before the release, and so the last 2 months of development we were kind of disheartened of like keep developing, because we knew in advance that it would be a major flop. And so I use that story more as a cautionary tale to developers of like what can happen, and make sure that like the way you present your game, if it's a remake, for example, being very, very clear in your Steam page, because this can sadly happen. And like go as much as basically kill your studio. So yeah, that's why I'm sharing the story, because I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, and I just don't want this to ever happen to someone else, because it was terrible to go through. And hopefully my story can serve as a cautionary tale of what can happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was very long.
No, it's fine. I want to make sure that everyone gets caught up on the details. I read both of the articles. First of all, the Reddit post that you made yourself.
Yep.
I read that in full, as well as I read the GameIndustry.biz article that was written about Retrigger as well. I didn't care about the Sam Altman bullshit, but I did read the section about Retrigger. So yeah, I'm definitely well aware of this story, but I wanted to make sure that everyone else who's tuned in here got the same story that I have. So I'm glad you spent all the time necessary to share your story. So,
cool, and again, like I said, thanks for giving me the tribute to do so on your stream.
Yeah, I mean, I only wish this channel was bigger, because this is one of those things, we see this shit with YouTubers happen all the time, where a video gets improperly demonetized, or a channel gets taken down, or whatever, and then what happens is, because the channel was big, everyone takes to Twitter, shouts at the big corporation, and then they fix the problem. And I wish that the internet would do that thing that it does for this kind of thing, because it's clearly a misunderstanding. It's clearly that same kind of situation where we just need the sleeping beast to wake up and listen. But unfortunately, I'm a small voice, and I'm not going to be helping you reach that. But, I hope that maybe someone, I don't know, some miracle that someone wakes up Mr. Gabe Newell over there, tears him away from making Half-Life 3 and finally fixing shit.
Yeah, and like I said, it's why, despite the size of your audience, it's still something, because word of mouth is powerful. So
yeah.
The more people we get to know the story, the more they'll share, even naturally, among friends. So
right, and I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. Is I definitely want to talk to you. You're a cool dude. But also, I figured maybe this would be, I have a small audience, but at least I can try to use that small audience for, that 1 in a million chance, more than a 0% chance that maybe something will come of it. So, anyways, so it's Wrath of Wood had said that the lesson learned is don't name things the same on Steam. Actually, that's not the correct lesson. The correct lesson is don't contact Steam support. Don't contact Steam support, because then they're going to start looking at your weird names, and then they're going to do something.
There's a bunch of, like I said, even in the Reddit post, it didn't really land on some commenters, but my point was I fully embrace that I've made mistakes on my side, but it's still not a reason, I think, for such drastic measures. And so I did make mistakes on my side of I probably this wouldn't have never happened if I just how could I say, just be okay with the fact that there's the original Retrigger being available and being called Retrigger, and just not touch the name. But like I said, it's once you know the story behind of the logic of changing the name, like I said, in retrospect, yes, it was a bad idea, but once you know about the story with the publisher perception and all that, makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, it's really unfortunate what happened, and like I said, that's the thing is, I know where they're coming from, because like we talked earlier, sadly there is shady developers and all that. So I can totally see how like them dealing with those kind of issues probably daily, and they don't have a lot of time to spend like listening to the details of each developer. And so like quickly it was like, oh, I mean, you're probably shady, so we're just gonna take that down. But yeah, it's sometimes, yeah, legit developers like me do fall through the cracks there. And so yeah, it's just a bunch of misunderstanding, a bunch of bad timing, and like circumstance that led to this. But still, it shows how such a little issue can really lead to such big impacts as, for example, not being able to offer the full-time job that I hoped to offer to my team at some point once we were more financially stable. So yeah, that's basically the thing to be aware of.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things. It's sort of like I joked about not contacting Steam support, but really, you know, it came down to that you, if I recall correctly from the article, I'm not sure if you actually put enough emphasis on this when you were telling the story, but it seemed like this all really sort of stemmed because you had put a placeholder release date on.
Yeah.
Which one was it? It was the remake, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You put a placeholder release date, and unfortunately, that date came and went. And once you go past the release date, you need to contact Steam to make the change. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So really, I would say that the real thing that I don't know how many of the people who are watching my streams are going to be doing remakes and stuff like that. That probably is not pertinent to them.
It's a specific situation. Yeah.
It's a very specific situation. However, setting the date thing, I think, is pertinent to a lot of the people who are watching. So I do think that the real lesson here is don't fuck around and find out with your release date. Set a placeholder date that is very, very placeholder. Don't be ambitious about it. That's the end of story there. Don't be ambitious about it.
And honestly, I think probably the best thing to do is just put that date so far out in the future until you know your real release date, so that you don't get that situation. Because what happened is again, in hindsight, a lot of people were like, well, how can you not keep track of your release date? But the thing is, Steam asks for a release date, even if it's not public. So for me, it was oh, it's just a detail. It's really who cares what the release date is, because nobody sees it. But then I wasn't aware that you can't change it after you go over that date, because before that you can really anytime just log in, change your release date willy-nilly, and that's no problem. And so I was like, oh well, whatever. No, that date is not public, but it had actually an impact going over it, because I couldn't just bring up the calendar again and just change the date, and that's what led to contacting Steam support and this whole debacle in the end. But it's a very good point. What you're saying is, I think the most important thing is really and make sure to not go over your temporary release date, even if it's not public.
Yeah. What was I going to say about that? I was going to say something. Oh no. Oh gosh, release dates. I don't know. All I can say is, man, that sucks.
Yeah, basically that's all there is to say, honestly.
Yeah, that's all there is. Just, man, that sucks.
Yeah, and I had the chance to actually tell my story like in a panel of like a major gaming event in Montreal, where I'm from, and yeah, so I talked about that story in public, and I was kind of surprised at the reaction, but it was, um, yeah, I mean, it makes sense in hindsight, but the room was filled with actually like other developers, and the more I kept telling the story, the more there was like audible gasps in the audience, and in the end, like even some people were crying and all that because they could relate of like, well, that could happen to me, who knows, and it's like so terrible because people know how difficult it already is to make games and sell them and all that, and having that kind of thing that can just kill like those years of effort and money investment that you make into really realizing that project, it really resonated with people. And so yeah, like I said, I won't go into the details, but I know that like we all know that the internet can be toxic sometimes, and I've seen it firsthand with kind of the reaction on Reddit. Um, but still, the way I see it is like, even if this story can just spare at least one single developer of going through that, then it was worth it to go public about it, despite like some kind of backlash. So yeah, my hope is just really that it never ever happens again.
Yeah. In fact, actually, I remember what I was going to say. Those people on Reddit, yeah. Here's the thing. Those people on Reddit, clearly, they don't know what it's like to have a busy fucking life. I have to manage my entire life through Google Calendars and spreadsheets. And if I am not using those things, I am forgetting everything.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I was wearing so many hats already, so it wasn't in my priorities to just check a Steam page release date when we were already so busy of making the game and making it the quality that we hoped it would be. And that's another thing of like that's linking to the performance of the game, is that all this time sticking to Steam could have gone in actually more development and polish. So that's another thing that led to, sadly, that kind of rushed release. So yeah, it's really just, yeah, like you said, sucks. That's basically all there is to is there is to say about it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Like when you're telling that story, I think I heard a quiver in your voice. And if you were like on the verge of crying, if I'm reading into this too much, I'm sorry, but I can totally get it, because let me frame it this way. My dude, Mr. Retrigger, had worked his ass off working at Ubisoft, which I cannot imagine what that might be like, to earn enough money to finally make his magnum opus. And I know every fucking RPG developer in here has that magnum opus that they want to make. And he had it. He was there on the tip of his tongue. He was ready to make it happen. He was ready to start work on that magnum opus. And then Steam took it all away. Those fucking bastards. So, I don't know if I was mishearing you, but if you were honestly really that close to maybe needing to let out a little bit of a cry, I get it. I really get it. There are just so many times having that shit just taken away from you at basically when you feel like you are certain that you have this made, and then bullshit that is out of your control decides to say, nah, not today. It is devastating. It is tough.
Yeah, I think that's really the word for it. Honestly, it's like I said, the summer was terribly hard to go through. I won't get into the details, but it was like really, really dark place in my life. And yeah, like it's totally unrelated, but I had like the death of my cat at the same time, and then the Steam thing, and it was like just an overwhelming time to go through of like just being like, man, can anything just go right now?
Oh my god, so, this is reaching parody levels of sadness.
It is.
No, you lost your dream game and your cat.
Yep. So it was it was a very very difficult time. So like I've been lucky to being well surrounded. Honestly, like because I have had friends and especially family that like they saw what was going on and kind of had an intervention with me of like, look, it's not the end of the world. But at the moment it felt like it because like it's your like it becomes your whole life at some point, and like you're not a doctor saving lives, but in the end it's still like you have so much your hand into it, and then being so arbitrarily told nope, you can't do that, was like so devastating. So so you got it right.
Yeah, it's not saving lives, but it is definitely, it becomes your whole identity, and then
exactly,
and then suddenly someone is taking that identity away from you without, like, it's totally out of your control. You are completely powerless to it, and that feeling of powerlessness sucks, man.
It really that's basically what it felt like, and I can't stress enough that I'm sure that the person who took down the page like sadly just got a misunderstanding, and I don't think they were acting in any way of like maliciously or anything. It's just unfortunate what happened, but it still remains that I think it still sheds light of how much you can pour years of your life into making something, and then having a corporation misunderstanding you and having such huge impact on you. And so we just gotta be careful of those things.
Yeah, man, that sucks. Let's see, what did RCX say? Honestly, it's been good to have insight of a developer who's not an RPG developer. Yeah, man, we gotta pay attention to other people besides just RPG guys. You know, we need game development insight, not just RPG making insights.
And you remind me of something that. That's something that I really, really love about the industry, like the indie side of things, especially like, yes, it is a saturated market, and yes, there's a whole lot of competition, but I never felt any, how could I say, like adversity against other developers and anything. Like we all know how tough it is to just do it already, and so everyone just wants the success of the others, despite this tough market, and that's something that I was very like happy to see how much understanding and support there was in the industry. Like I said, I'm mostly in the local game dev community. Like that's the one I know most, but like all those people, all those developers here in Montreal, like the amount of support and understanding I've received, like, was really humbling. And I feel like in the end, just overall developers all around the world, we just need to like stick together and just share our advice, share our experience, and just make sure that everyone has hopefully an experience as boot selling as possible. So
it's one of the things, you know, honestly, actually, when I was learning Unity, I was actually sort of surprised that I went to the Unity forums to ask for help with a problem that I had, and I basically got tumbleweeds, except for one smart-ass answer.
Yeah.
I will say that, like, I think one of the other reasons why I've been able to stick with RPG Maker for as long as I have is that the community itself is so tightly knit, it borderlines on incestuous.
But yeah, honestly, it feels like family at some point. So
Yeah, it's so funny that it's just like, you know, not everyone, like, you know, take for example Wrath of Wood, Mr. Orc. Like, Mr. Orc is in my Discord, but Wrath of Wood is not. But, you know, like, Wrath of Wood knows Mr. Orc, and Mr. Orc knows some other people. We've all gotten around. We all have our channels. We all have our games. We all have these things, and it's like we are all over the place. And it's so funny, just like saying, "Oh, dang, that user was also involved with this game. Oh, that's neat."
yeah. That's the thing. Also, like, the game industry feels so incredibly huge. Like, in terms of success, like, we're bigger than music and cinema combined, but at the end of the day, you see that it's such a small world, and you find that everyone knows everyone at some point. So yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess that would be a good chance to ask you one of the questions I really wanted to ask, which was, you know, it's, at least within the RPG Maker community, it's not very uncommon to have like a lot of like collaborations with other developers, like maybe, you know, a side quest, a very short, simple side quest where it's like, I'm gonna feature the character from this other guy's game just for fun, and it actually winds up creating this neat little like cross-pollination. Like, I know my character is in this one guy's game mostly just because he was offering. I don't even know if I really like his game, but whatever, he offered. Anyways, so, you know, it's pretty common, at least within RPG Maker, for like folks to kind of like cross-pollinate with each other by having like these collaborations. And I'm just wondering, have you ever thought about doing something like that?
Yeah, well, for the game itself, not quite yet, in terms of like cross-pollinating games, but I think there's definitely something interesting to make here. I was waiting that the sequel would be like more advanced before going into that, but it's another good point of like, if you never ask, you never get anything, and that's really a big philosophy of mine as well. Is like, sometimes I just find those opportunities of, I just tell myself, oh, it would be so fun to work with that person, but then, like, for example, they're way bigger than you, and you feel like, oh, they won't care, they're unreachable and all that. But more often than not, I've been really having the opposite effect, and it's like, the worst that can happen is either they don't respond to you or they say no. But for example, with Retrigger 2, we have some collaborations with like YouTubers, for example, like Girlfriend Reviews, which does the voice for a whole character, and it was just something that I heard Shelby from that channel say, like, oh, I would love to do voice acting for games at some point. And I just messaged her, and like, I even a couple of months passed that I didn't get an answer because she was busy. But then she was like, hell yeah, I'm interested. And it was like, whoa, like, I didn't expect this to actually happen. But yeah, it's been a super fun collaboration. And yeah, hopefully I can do more of that, because in the end, it's just, I think everyone gets something out of it. Like, it's a win-win situation for everyone. Like, either it's a fun experience for the other person, or it gets visibility for both you and the person that you're collaborating with. So yeah, I think it's something that would be totally interesting to explore.
Yeah. I actually don't watch Girlfriend Reviews, but I do know that name, so I think they must be a pretty big channel. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they have. I know they have at least over 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, generally that's been my mindset as well. I know I had talked to you shortly after, I think I don't remember, I guess the timeline doesn't really matter, but I don't know, it was shortly after I'd streamed your game, about maybe reaching out to other streamers to send keys to as well. And, you know, I keep a list of, like, people that I would contact, and, you know, sometimes, like, I know that they are very big channels and probably don't have time for my, you know, silly little RPG Maker game, but, as you said, the worst they can say is no, or nothing.
Yep, exactly.
So, but, the best they can say is sure, and then they put your game in front of a large audience, and that's great.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, and so I probably like should allocate some time to indeed send keys. I was planning to do it, but yeah, life happened, and so months go by so quick. But that's something that yeah, I will definitely do, because that's the thing, is like launching a game is of course the biggest step, but we've seen time and time again, like, games that came out and nobody even heard about it, and then suddenly, like, just one big streamer picks it up and then it goes crazy. Like, even games like Among Us, like, we know how big it became, but then the first 2 years it was kind of a flop for them, so who knows what can happen. So yeah.
Well, how about this? We'll make a deal right here, live on stream. If you, and I don't know if you want to do, we could probably discuss details in private, but oh my god, we've reached the end of the videos again. How many times have we gone through this? At this point, I think the people who have watched the stream have probably memorized the solution to all your puzzles. At this point, I'm probably damaging your sales at this point than actually getting you sales, because they have this memorized at this point. Here, I'll tell you what. Let's just put on my tunes. That's not going to get me copyright claimed. Shuffle tracks. All right. Anyways, so as I was saying, if you're interested at all, we can obviously talk details in private. I am coming up on a winter break, and I'll have some free time that I'd like to spend most of that time developing on my game. But I will have more than enough free time that I can be your short-term community manager for you, and I can send out some keys to some of these people for you. All I would ask in return is, can I make a cameo in my game for Retrigger?
Oh yes, of course.
Okay, in that case, also, it would make my job easier if I make a Retrigger cameo. If you have pixel art skills. Do you have pixel art skills?
Ah, gosh, I wish I had.
Well, dang, that's okay. I have some. I have some pixel art skills. I'm not great at it, but I'm good enough. TM. So, okay. You might get a cameo in my game, or if it's too difficult for me, you might just get a free short-term community manager.
Cool. It's all good for me. I will tell. Honestly, thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. We can talk about details later, but now, my whole audience has heard it here first. This is a thing that, I know you're earlier in the stream we were talking about valuing your own time, and this totally goes against that philosophy. But, whenever I've come across games that I believe in, I see the potential there, I'm willing to offer my services for free. Mr. Orc, he had his game, he needed a musician, and he's like, I know a musician, and I was like, and I know you, and I know your game is pretty fun, so I did a couple of songs for him. I also realized he's impossible to please and decided I'm never going to write music for him again. But anyways, I did do a couple of cool songs for him, and out of the goodness of my heart, no charge, he did offer his skills in return if I ever need them, and maybe one day I'll take him up on it, but maybe not, and that's okay. I'm okay that I gave him a free service and may not ever get anything in return for it. I'm just happy that I was able to contribute to something that I believe in. And that's what I'm saying for Retrigger.
Yeah, and honestly, like, there's often those situations that you can be very surprised at the consequences of it, I would say. Like, sometimes it's you just get... like, because you work with someone, then they recommend you to someone else, and then they offer you like contract work and all that, so it can really snowball. So I think, like I said, it really shows what I was saying earlier of like the community of devs. Like it's so I don't know. I guess I would say pure of like just everyone wants the success of others. And that's, I think, something powerful, and it's really humbling for everyone, I think, in the end. And yeah, I think there's some magic behind this of like, yeah, like I have X skill and I have X amount of time and I can give a hand, and it goes both ways. And yeah, in the end, everyone comes out better.
Yeah. And also, yes, RCX, I agree. Mr. Orc's reaction is perfect. He knows. I've told him before that he's impossible to please. And I had to go through... Here, you know what? We're playing tunes right now. You'll need to briefly turn on the audio of the stream so you can hear. Let me crank up this tune that I made for him. It's a banger of a track. I was proud of this one, and he was like... No, it's dumb. It doesn't sound like battle music. Here it is.
Catching up on this too.
Listen to that. It rocks out, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit in music, but very little. But yeah, it's so fun to make tracks, and yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, I know I'm good. Like I said, I've been doing music for basically my whole life. I'm not saying I'm perfect. We have another person who sadly hasn't joined, but she doesn't really do mornings very well, who's kind of the yin to my yang. She's been writing music her whole life. I've been doing music production my whole life. We make the perfect team. I know how to make things sound good. She knows how to write beautiful melodies. And it's just a good combination. Anyways, but yeah. Which I guess I could say, if you ever want special Retrigger music, reach out to me. You know a man.
Awesome.
And yeah, Mr. Orc says, it doesn't sound like regular battle music. This is boss music. No, it's battle music. It's just really groovy battle music. Anyways, but yeah. Why was I talking about? I don't know. Just Orc is impossible to please. So. Anyways. Oh, look, we got your, I have that open there. It's Bold Spirit Game Studios page. I was looking for my Google Doc to see if there were any other questions. Should probably knock some of these off so I know which ones we've already finished. You know what? I gotta ask this anyways, although you kind of answered it anyways. What games did you work on while at Ubisoft? And this is the reason why I want to ask this. Can we partially blame you for Skull and Bones' troubled development?
I wish it was that simple. But no, I worked at Ubisoft Montreal, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Skull and Bones was made in Singapore. But apparently it's coming out soon, so I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
But what I worked on is really Assassin's Creed Origins, the first DLC for it, and then Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Okay. The 2 really long games.
yeah, gosh. And especially for Valhalla, I was in charge of like the whole ending of the game, and maybe like 10% of people got there because it's such a long game. But oh well, it was fun stuff because I was known as the what we call the exotic gameplay guy, because I was using the tools like in a kind of a emergent new way. So I was I had a very close relationship with the technical directors, because they were like, well, we'll give you access to some tools that are invisible, so don't tell anyone, we're just giving it to you, so that I was able to make like some cool gameplay that's like very different from the rest of the game, because it's really basically my bread and butter. Because like for example, even with the Unreal, like I don't actually program anything like as line of code, so I just use Blueprint, which is like a kind of a visual scripting thing. And yeah, I can. That's basically my specialty of like doing some funky stuff with those pre-made bits of code and do some gameplay that's not necessarily how the tools were designed to do, but then it gives some new gameplay opportunities that you can explore.
Yeah, so what I'm taking away from this is all of the interesting parts were designed by you, and all of the boring padding was designed by everyone else.
I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but I guess you could say that.
I think I know the answer to this one as well, but I still want to ask it. Did you ever spend any time developing in the indie space?
Kind of. It's actually quite funny, but when I was still studying, even like before university, in video games, I got an internship into a game studio that sadly isn't around anymore. But I made some little props on an indie game that actually was a huge controversy when it came out.
Oh no!
Because of like a bunch of reasons of like I don't remember exactly, but I think the game like went on Steam, but then the creator like invested like 50% of what was asked to like kind of boost the visibility of the Kickstarter, and it was a huge blunder. And it was like, yeah, I worked on that.
All right.
So I dabbled in a little bit of it.
A little bit, yeah. I definitely just seeing, comparing like what you talk about in your Discord and what's been going on with the development of Retrigger and Retrigger 2. It just sounds like a completely alien world to me compared to like the tiny little, devs that like a game that has a budget of $10,000 is, rich for my blood, So that's just like one of the reasons it's like, I wanted to ask that is just because there's such a difference in the worlds of game development between like where most of my audience is at, including myself, and where you are at.
Yeah, but in the end, like I said, we're just passionate people and just want to make games. So it's just like different, like basically background. But like I'd say like even people like in your audience, if they want to reach that, I don't know how to word it, but like that step of where I'm at, it's totally feasible. It's I won't hide that it's a lot of, like I said, blood, sweat, and tears, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, yeah, we do know that it's possible. I'm not sure. There's a few really famous RPG Maker games that have come out that got like a lot of attention that you may not even realize were built with the engine, which is good. I mean, we shouldn't give a shit about what it was made with, but then again, we have our own tag on Steam. So,
yeah.
So, do you know the game One Shot?
Oh, I know it by name, but not much more than that.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, these are still all indie games, but you have heard of it. That is one of our RPG Maker darlings. I bet you might know Lisa the Painful.
Yeah, I've heard that name as well.
All right, okay. Yeah, that's another RPG Maker darling that we have. There are two more recent examples because Lisa the Painful is pretty old and so is One Shot. But we have Omori.
Yeah, I've heard that one as well. I think I saw a video of it.
Yeah,
Game Grumps played it.
yeah, probably. It really got a lot of attention. Once again, that's another one of our RPG Maker darlings. Another game that came out of the engine that just did gangbusters, just selling like crazy. A little bit smaller, but more recent is Symphony of War. Have you heard that one?
This one doesn't ring a bell, sadly.
Okay, it is a little bit on the smaller side, but it has done pretty well for itself. It does appeal to a little bit more niche of an audience because it's like a tactics battle system, but it's like not like your Final Fantasy Tactics kind of thing. I don't know. It's doing its own unique thing. So yeah, it definitely has a little bit more niche appeal. But either way, it's done really well for itself as well. So it's definitely.
I see that I have One Shot in my library. I have so many games to play.
There you go. You got One Shot. You can experience the magic of RPG Maker for yourself. Yeah. So, anyways, the point is, it's definitely possible for developers to be able to reach that level because obviously others have done it. But yeah, it definitely, as you said, takes the blood, sweat, and tears to get there, and probably a lot of luck as well. And,
that's
also,
something.
It also takes making sure that you don't set the wrong release date on your store page.
There you have it, folks. All you have to know is right there.
So, let's see. Let's get caught up on chat. Orc says, sounds to me like Max is a perfect candidate to become an RPG Maker dev, taking an engine and just doing anything but what the engine was designed for. Yeah, you'd be right at home. Like, so the way that RPG Maker's whole, like anyone can make a game thing is they have their event system, which is what I always kind of called click to program. It's a very dumbed down version of Unreal's blueprints.
Right.
So you just create an event and then click in there what functions you want. You got variable controls, switch controls, loops, conditionals. You got your basics and you can, go wild with it just out of the box using events, your click to program stuff. So yeah, you could play around with it and maybe make something completely wacky. And you'd probably be right at home because unless, like, there's two camps we got for RPG Maker devs. You got the people who are just putting out shovelware, Final Fantasy ripoffs that were made in a week. And then you got the people who are making weird walking simulators and horror games that are, too deep for me.
I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll develop something on it at some point.
Whenever you got free time, which doesn't sound like right now, but whenever you do, Let's see. RCX said, to be frank, the puzzles in Retrigger are pretty cool. I'd believe that the only fun sections of an Ubisoft game came from. I think so. We know where any of Ubisoft's success came from. It came for those 4 years when there was Assassin's Creed Origin and Valhalla. Ubisoft was riding high. We know why. It's this man. Sorry, this side. It's this man right here. It's because of him. And then he's left, and now we can see that, Ubisoft is, trying to find someone to buy them, but the whole game industry is, like, dying right now because everyone's getting laid off.
Yeah, gosh, that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah. Orc says, blood, sweat, tears, the right release date, the blood of 1,000 virgins. Got it. Yep. You got it.
Yep, there you go.
That's the recipe for success right there. It's this man who made part of the game only 10% of players ever seen. Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. Let's see. Do you enjoy playing RPGs and JRPG games? If so, what are some of your favorites?
I mean, like I said, like Paper Mario is a big one for me. Kind of addicted to Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment, so
that's a good one. I think a lot of people are.
Gosh, I mean, RPG is such a broad term.
Yeah, so it really has become that. Let's narrow it down to something more in a classical style, kind of like your D&D, maybe Bethesda RPGs, when it comes to Western stuff. And then I think there's plenty of examples for what might constitute as a JRPG. You have Persona, Final Fantasy. I don't know. I say lots of examples and only 2 come to mind. But you get the idea.
Yeah. Gosh, it's a good question. Well, like I said, Baldur's Gate, Divinity, Diablo, these kind of games I played a lot. I guess I would be very old school by saying this, but I mean, it's a classic, but Chrono Trigger for JRPGs.
I think you'd have a lot of fans here with that one.
Yeah, so, I mean, pretty much the classics, I would say.
Yeah. Gosh, I know you really wanted me to ask you the mental illness questions, but I am actually just kind of trying to kind of go through these questions because it's starting to get. Oh my gosh, actually, it's really late here, so I do kind of want to start wrapping up. So
yeah, of course.
Really sorry to skip those questions. I feel like those might have a longer discussion behind them. So I'm gonna kind of just kind of jump over those. I did want to ask you this one. It could be an interesting question if you are aware. It seems the Talos Principle 2 has sold really well for itself. I'll mention I have not personally played either Talos Principle games, but due to its adjacency in design to Retrigger, I'm curious if its recent success has any effect on you.
I mean, it kind of does, because publishers always ask, like, what are the recent games that show that it's like a genre or a type of game that has success. So I'm glad that Talos Principle 2 exists, because now I can have a more recent game to mention, because like I said, I'm kind of an old school guy in a way of like, I wish I was there during the development of early 2000, like the games that came out either early 2000 or 2010s even. And so, like, in my reference, I always mention, like I said, Portal, or like The Witness, or Antichamber, but they're like all early 2000s game, and so it's kind of tough to prove to publishers that it's games that I would say, like, yes, it is a niche, but I would call it a popular niche. because I feel like there's really a public waiting for those kind of games, and the issue is that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I've heard a lot of publishers say, "Oh, but puzzle games are dead," which personally I don't agree with. Uh, but at the
They
same
always
time,
say
it's like,
that.
yeah, but at the same time, it's like, well, if nobody or a very little people make those games, well, of course that the statistics won't look good, but you have to like take a risk sometime. And like I said, I think it's even a gap in the market right now to have games like Retrigger or Talos Principle. So, like I said, I'm very glad that it exists so that we can prove that there's a public for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's even like precedent for this kind of thing. You mentioned gaps in the market. Like, you know, I think of like we had our whole like Call of Duty era of first-person shooters that just ran the market from basically like 2005 to, I don't know, way too long. I'd probably say into like 2015, like a whole decade of just like, these are the type of first-person shooters. And all those, you know, old 90s shooters that came before, nah, they're old, no one wants that anymore. And then, you know, Doom 2016 came out and basically followed that old school formula. And there's been a huge resurgence in what's now been called the boomer shooter, where it's like fast-moving, circle strafing, you know, weapon wheel first-person shooters. And I'm happy for that because I like those first-person shooters. Those are some of my favorites. And considering how much of a resurgence there has been, I mean, it just shows that when there's like these gaps in the market, it's not because it's not popular. That gap in the market there is just, as you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have publishers who are saying, well, it's not popular anymore, so we don't want to publish that. But that's why there's no fucking games in that market, because you don't want to publish it.
And that's what I'm trying to say to them, of like, well, if you take the risk, you like, of course it's a gamble, but like, I think it's actually the perfect time to actually publish a game like that, because you don't have much competition there, so why not?
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that question actually turned out to be interesting. Because
it's another game on my list that I have to get to, the sequel. I played the first one, but yeah, gosh. So many games, so little time.
Yeah, I understand that. Man, I had the original Talos Principle on my wish list for the longest time. And then I think it just got to a point, I really like to keep my wish list nice and tidy. I want to make sure that the games that are actually on there, I'm actually going to buy. And I think I just eventually asked myself, when am I ever actually going to buy this game? And I just wound up removing it and then never played the Talos Principle. And then Talos Principle 2 comes out and I'm like, well, dang, I kind of wish I'd actually bought the Talos Principle back then.
Yeah, I mean, we all... I'm sure we all go over some gems, sadly.
Yeah.
Because of circumstances.
Yeah. Let's get caught up on chat real fast. RCX says, the number one problem as we face is that everyone is trying to make the next Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
But they're not skilled, plus talented, plus lack a team, or fundamentally misunderstand what made the game good. That's the one thing that I see a lot, and I think RCX himself has said this about other games that I've played in the past, where one of the really popular, big, influential games in the RPG Maker community is, of course, Earthbound. People really want to make that same kind of quirky kind of RPG, JRPG kind of game, but I think often what happens is people seem to misunderstand it at a more fundamental level, so they wind up just producing we have Earthbound at home, you know, the cheap knockoff version, the Walmart brand version of Earthbound, and no one wants to play that. They don't want to play a cheap imitation of it. They want to play an evolvement of what came before.
Yep. Yeah, so. I see it all the time. Like I said, with I'm a director of like final student projects now at the university I went to, and it's the mistake that happens every time. Now it changed to something else, but when I was at university, like all the projects were, when you asked about what type of art style or even gameplay they were aiming for, they all said like, oh, we want to make the next Journey. I was like, yeah, good luck about that.
I mean, I don't know what the pretentious college students might be wanting to make now, but I do know that in the indie space, I see way too many games that want to be Dark Souls. Not a Souls-like. This frustrates me. This goes off on another rant I have. It's like, I don't have a problem if you are inspired by Dark Souls and want to evolve that genre. But it really annoys me when I see like all of these indie games that basically just want to be Dark Souls. They copy it to a T. Like when you fight a boss, it's gotta have that, like, you know, you go through the fog wall and then there's the big boss there, and then it's like, it shows the text, like the boss's name, and then when you die, it has like the dim background and it says you died. And it's like, why do you devs copy it? All of this stuff, like, can you have at least one original idea? Please just try to evolve this idea a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's easy to like not. Well, basically, what was said in chat of like, you don't take you misunderstand what made the game good and what should be expanded upon. It's like it's not like the coding around it. It's something more deep than that, more fundamental. And yeah, especially myself, like I play a lot of games where I'm just like, I want to make that game, but like pushing the concept further.
Yeah.
Of course, there's the old problem of time and money to do it, but yeah, going forward, that's something I really want to explore more of. Like, of course, I would ask the original developer if they're okay with it, but like some examples, there's Return of the Obra Dinn, or more recently Chants of Sennaar, that are so interesting, and I'm like, oh, there's so much potential to make more content with those basic concepts.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I'm... This is where our differences are. You mentioned Obra Dinn. I know it's a cool game, but I don't know. I've always been kind of more of a gameplay first kind of person. Like I like stories and stuff in my game. It's cool to have them there, but I would rather only have enough of a story to glue the parts together, and then just have a really good gameplay, rather than having a lot of good story and a little bit of gameplay. Like, that's not my kind of game, and I think that's the thing that kind of gets me caught up on. A lot of indie games tend to go down the like deep storytelling route, and I just don't care for those kind of games. I'd rather shoot something.
Yeah, but actually, Obra Dinn, like at the surface, it might look like it, but it's the gameplay that's actually really interesting, of like piecing together, like using a lot of deduction and logic to kind of find the name of the people and how they died. But yeah, that's something that really appeals to me personally, of like everything that's kind of detective game, and it's really hard to nail. Because sometimes it's like either too obvious or too obscure, so it's a very fine balance to find. But yeah, like for example, I'm a huge fan of the Phoenix Wright series, which is kind of a visual novel, but it's really the moment that I like is like finding the inconsistency in the testimony and saying haha, and showing the piece of evidence that crashes, shatters the witness on the stand.
Right. Yeah. Let's see what Chad had to say. What I find when people make retro-style games, they just emulate all the jank and limitations those games had, but have none of the awesome characters, writing, or story. Yeah, that one's a common one. RCX says, because, like, I use RPG Maker to make my weird angel, demon, magical girl story into an interactive format. I don't give a fuck what my influences are, as long as what I make is cool. Yeah. I hate games that drown you with lore, to be honest. I'd rather piece it together from details I'm seeing from the environment.
Yep, I agree with that.
I agree to an extent. Going back to the whole Souls-like thing, I'm not a fan that this is something that they like to... I didn't even really like it in Dark Souls either, that, like, the storytelling is really, really vague, and you kind of have to go through, like, every item description, and, I don't know...
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a fan of this. I know it's caught on.
But I would go in, like, an in-between. But yeah, that's something actually that like I've seen so many indies pitch for the game that like they will present to publishers, and like they will spend so much time on lore, but it's not like the appeal of your game. Usually it's really like what makes your game stand out in terms of gameplay and all that. And I understand, like, you might have a very awesome story, but it's like we hear so many stories all the time, it's really hard to catch the attention that way.
Yep.
So yeah, something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, my audience, y'all hear that? All these indie developers pitching lore to publishers, and they don't want that shit. So why the fuck are you doing it in your game? Stop it! I'm tired of reading your stupid lore dumps that have no bearing on your game.
Especially in the intro where nothing means anything to you. Like,
yeah.
They name drop so many characters and you're like, well, at the moment I don't care about those characters because I haven't met them.
Yeah, I have not been invested in your world, and yet you are telling me about all this nonsense that means nothing to me. This is so common in RPG Maker, and it is wasting everyone's time. It's wasting the developers' time because the players are not interested, and the players feel like their time's being wasted because they're not interested in it.
Yeah, so there's definitely a way to showcase your story in an awesome way. Like I said, it might be awesome, but it's really how you tell it that makes the difference.
Yep.
A huge wall of text, well, might as well read a book, so...
Yeah, it's almost like games are hard to develop, and every aspect should probably have a lot of thought behind it. Like, thinking about the lore is one thing, but also, you know, thinking about how to deliver that lore is also another thing that maybe you should spend time thinking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's see. We'll get caught up on chat and then go back to some more questions. Indies shouldn't go and try to emulate a very edge case scenario of a game that has a huge team of veterans pulling it off. Maybe. I think there might be some nuance to that discussion, but I'm not going to go into it. I have an entire universe stored away in documents, but I'd use only 5% of it for each game, to be honest. Yeah. I don't keep lore documents. My story is... It exists.
And that's fine. Like I said, it really depends what you aim for with your game.
Yeah. The way that I do the story in my game is... I mean, I guess there is sort of an overarching story, but it's kind of built on having these vignettes. Where, like... Each of the levels have, like, their own mystery that needs to be solved, and so the story is... It's not, like, pertaining to the, you know, main overarching story. Instead, you have this vignette for this level that you're trying to solve. And then there's, like, NPCs you can interact with. They have their own side quests, and those side quests are just, you know, a vignette into that character's story. It doesn't really... have much bearing on the overarching story. I think the overarching story itself is basically the bad guy did bad things, go stop the bad guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, I really liked my finishing managing a game question that's like role-playing different scenarios, but I'm going to skip that one too. I think it's only fair. I skipped the questions you wanted to ask. I'm going to skip the question I really wanted to ask. What aspects of a game do you think are the most important for a viable commercial product?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a complex one because there's so many moving parts and like different situations, but I mean, I think it kind of ties in with your previous question in the document of like you have to have a minimum, but also you have to. It's a skill to be able to evaluate your game and being like that's good enough, because sometimes it's really, like we said, there's scope creep, but even outside of scope creep, you have like what you make, like some things might irritate you when you see players play it and you're like, just like the animation popped a little bit there or something, but then pretty much nobody notices that, so you have to kind of be able to evaluate what's really essential and what's not. And like I said, I think for the most viable commercial product, it's also being aware of what your game is and what you're aiming for. Like I said, if your game is a visual novel, then well, go for it all the way. And what I see a lot of games do, unfortunately, is they're trying to please everyone, or like I like to call it like make the pizza of like it's everything is there, yes, but nothing really meshes together well, and you don't have. It's way better to focus on what you're good at and what your game is good at, and go all the way on that front instead of putting every element of it of like you have a inventory management and you can have a procedural generation and all that, but really like it's important to be aware of what your product is and what you're trying to make and where your strength lies. So yeah, it's kind of a vague answer, but it really depends on the situation. But yeah, I would say like it's like I said, it's really a skill to have to be able to evaluate the quality of what you have and when to stop.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yep, pretty much knowing what is the kind of jank that's okay to be left in. It's a little bit jank, we're aware of that, but it's not gonna break the game, it's not gonna ruin the experience. So, yeah, there's a lot of people I think spend a lot of time trying to perfect their game. And as you said, also make the pizza, putting in all of these elements to their game, instead of just focusing on what they can do best.
Yep, totally.
Yep. I got one more question, but I'm going to go ahead and say now for the chat, this will be my last question, so if you guys have any questions to ask him before we wrap up, start typing them now. There's the chat delay, so, you know, do it while he answers my last question. So my last question, if a game ships and doesn't have rebindable keys, what is your impression of this game?
It's an interesting one because I'm a huge believer in accessibility and it's incredibly important. But I'm also aware of like it depends on how could I say? It depends, on the context a little bit. I think every game needs rebindable keys, but if it's not there directly at the release, I can accept it because I wouldn't stop that from me enjoying the game. What I mean by that is I've seen it firsthand with the first Retrigger, because at the release of the 2016 game, it didn't have rebindable keys, and there were for example Steam reviews saying, oh, it's a bad game because it doesn't have rebindable keys, but I was like, but have you played the actual game instead of just going in the menu and seeing there's no rebindable keys? So that's why my opinion is like kind of on the fence a little bit of like I updated the game shortly after with rebindable keys. So yeah, I would say I give the benefit of the doubt. Like I don't think not having rebindable keys therefore makes it a bad game, but definitely like you should have it. And like I said, there's a lot of people that sadly don't have like even the physical ability to play your game like it's intended to. So it's just good for everyone to have those tools to make sure as many people can enjoy what you actually made and the core of your game. So the more accessibility options you have, the better it is.
Yeah. It's not. Thank you for giving a real response to that too, by the way. I wasn't sure how much you were just going to lean into the meme on this channel about rebindable keys.
I think it's probably well known at this point, so I was like, oh, I'll go and give another perspective.
Yeah, that's good. I can say there's a personal element to it, to me as well. It's not rebindable keys necessarily, but there's a story I have. Actually, for another game that I had played previously on my channel, a small indie game. It was like an action combat game. It's kind of in the vein of like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, something like that. And it's definitely like a controller type of game. My brain is weird. And even though I have normal controls on my mouse, when I use a controller, I need to have the X axis inverted, not Y, X. And so when I had bought this game so long ago, I had made I think a pretty friendly support ticket to the devs and was just like, hey, it's really kind of hard for me to play this game without inverted X. Do you have any plans on patching it in? And they're like, oh yeah, for sure. We plan on adding it in the next update. And so I was like, okay, cool. You know what? I can wait until the next update. I gave it a fair shake. You know, I tried my best to just wrap my head around the not inverted x-axis, but it was too difficult for me. So I just decided I'd wait. I wouldn't refund the game. I'll wait until the patch comes out, and then I'll be able to play it. And then the next patch came out, and there was no inverted x-axis. And the next patch came out, and there was no inverted x-axis. And then I just gave up. At that point, it had been like 2 months. My window for refunding the game had long since passed. And I was stuck with this game that I can't play under the promise that the devs said that they would add this feature in. And then, so I played it on my stream, like I said, years later. I think that game released probably around the same time as the student project Retrigger. I think it was around 2016, 2017. And so years later, I play this game, and I still remember the story, and I remember saying, let's check if these fuckers ever added that x-axis in. And they never did it. To this day, the game does not have it on there, despite the devs promising me that they were gonna add it. So it's become like this personal vendetta. Make it so you can rebind the keys, set the controls the way you want. I do not have any sort of handicaps other than the weird way that my brain thinks that cameras should move when using an analog stick. Please, this is why. Please, just put the thing in there, because it is so shitty. I felt led on. I felt duped by this dev.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. It's really. That's why my answer was nuanced, and I think you bring up a good point of like of what I was trying to say is like, as a developer, you can't predict necessarily in advance everything that might be irritable to a player, but once you get the request and it's not something like far-fetched or very complex to implement, that's when I think it's okay, and you have to add those options. So that's basically what happened with the original Retrigger, like I said, of just people saying I want rebindable keys, and it was actually a bit complicated because I didn't like make the game logic be easily editable on that front, but then I put the time to make it because it felt important. But yeah, for your example of just inverting an x-axis, that's even like it's super easy to implement usually. So yeah, my answer is really like, if it doesn't have it at first, that's fine. But then if you ask about it, and it's not something like completely out of this world that you're asking, then the developers should make the time to implement those.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's other factors, as we know, of like, finding the time or having the team behind it that you can pay to make those updates. So of course, again, there's a nuance there.
Yeah.
But still, like, as soon as you can, if you have the capacity to do so, you should put a lot of care into that, because like I said, I feel like it's really sad that a lot of people, sadly, like for example, they have X handicap and they really want to play your game, but they can't, or they just even like you, like it's something mental of like, oh, it doesn't click in my head to have that specific X-axis, and like, especially when it's like I said, an easy implementation, you can make someone finally enjoy your game because they want to, but it's just like they can't because of X reason. So yeah, I think it's really important to include as many players as you can.
Yeah.
To enjoy what you made.
Yeah. So, and there's the funny thing about that game. First of all, actually, first I should say, I don't think there was any intentional, like, ill will behind this from the developers. I'm sure they were busy and they just forgot that they said.
I'm sure it just fell in the cracks of like.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that it still kind of sucked that it felt like I got strung along. They said they were gonna do it and then they didn't. But jokes on them. Turns out they were doing me a favor, because when I played it for the stream, it turned out to be an absolutely train wreck of a game. So they kind of saved me. The other interesting thing about this, though, was that that game had turned into a franchise where they had already released a sequel to it, and at the time when I had streamed it, they had a Kickstarter going, and it was so heartbreaking to me. I think I played this like right after you had canceled the Kickstarter, and it was so heartbreaking to me when I opened their Kickstarter page, and they didn't just get funded, they had like smashed the goal. And it's like, I mean, I know this is reality, that's just how it works, but still, I'm sitting there like, if they can do it, how come Retrigger can't? Their game sucked. Their first game was absolutely terrible, and yet they are still able to make a second game and then get funding for their third game. Anyways.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's a whole set of like circumstances and timing and being lucky, because that's the. I think that's a big challenge in the industry right now. You can even have a masterpiece of a game, but then nobody heard about it or something, and it's really tough to kind of go past that wall and reach players, because more often than not, like, your public exists. It's just tough to find them and make them aware that your product exists. So it's a very, very big challenge at the moment.
Yeah. So, all right, let's do one last catch up on chat here. see. What was the last one? Because an issue I see is that people work on cool things like shield breaking or stagger meters, but their enemy encounters are not different than normal, or crafting. This is RPG RPG stuff. Or the crafting thing. I mean, it's not just RPG. I mean, RPGs have had crafting going on for forever now, but now you have, like, ever since Minecraft, now every game has to have some form of crafting as well.
Yeah, well, I think it was for when I was talking about the pizza, and that's a good one of, like, they feel obligated to have a crafting system, but then not every game needs it, so yeah.
I will say this. You know, I avoided having a crafting system in my game. I deliberately tried to keep the scope really simple, and crafting definitely adds a lot of scope to it. However, what I realized is there is actually something interesting that crafting does do, at least for, like, exploration, especially when it comes to JRPGs, is that you want to offer some sort of reward for the player for going off the beaten path, but if it's just, like, you know, 10 feet off the beaten path, giving them a whole chest as a reward is a little bit too much. So you need something that's, like, better than nothing, but still not much. And so crafting materials is a great reward for that. And so I found it really hard in my game since I didn't have crafting. It's like, actually, it was Orc. Orc had playtested my game. This was a long time ago, too, and he complained about all these dead ends in my game. And I racked my brain. I was like, man, I almost wish I had a crafting system, because I could just throw some materials there, and then he would have gotten a reward for going down to those dead ends. So I had to think about that for a while. I came up with a solution that's, I don't know if it's great, but, you know, it's not scope. It's not adding too much scope. Is, you know, I talked about having these NPCs in my towns with their quests. There's a whole, like, town mechanic with my game. Not quite Animal Crossing, but, you know, a little bit of that kind of, like, get to know the community kind of thing. And so you can find these, like, little presents that are just kind of scattered at some of the dead ends. You can pick them up and just give them to some of your favorite characters, and they give you, you know, a tiny little reward. Nothing much, but a little something for going out of the way.
Yep. Yeah, and like I said, for an RPG, it's usually a good solution.
Yeah.
But it's all that to say that, like, it doesn't have to be, for example, crafting.
Yeah, exactly.
To be a reward, like I said, you can tie that to side quests and all that. So there's just other ways to do it. But yeah, it's. I think my point was more for, like, games that don't usually have crafting.
Right.
And right now it feels like shoehorned into a lot of games, and you're just like, oh man, like you don't have to do that. It just distracts from
yes.
what's good in your game.
Yes. Yeah, honestly, when it comes to, there's a lot of games I think I've seen that say they have crafting, and it's just like kind of one of those roll your eyes moments. It's like, I don't even want to have to sit here and memorize your whole crafting book in the game. I just want to focus on, you know, again, whatever the game is good at. Shooting things, probably, because that's what I play. Yep. So, anyways, like, God, sorry, this is another tangent. Fallout 4, I know it's a little bit older, but Fallout 4, and they implemented their whole settlement thing and, like, crafting. I actually really hated this because of what its psychological effect on me. Because, like, I could no longer, like, just do a quest or go through an area normally. I had to, like, scan every nook and cranny for every, like, piece of duct tape and screw, and it just killed the pacing. But I felt like I had to do it, because if I didn't do it, then I would be short on supplies, and I'd be gimping myself for the rest of the game. I hate that shit, man.
Yeah, it felt like it was like 2 games in one.
Yeah. Also, peeps tend to say X and Y about including feedback, but they never do. Yeah, I think so. When developers talk about like what happened with me with the X-axis thing. I think part of it is like scope a little bit. Part of it's because they're busy that they say, oh, I'm gonna do that, and then they're busy and they either forget or they just don't have the time. The other thing to it too is that I think, especially when it comes to indie devs, where there's not really a team behind it, they are the face of the game, basically. I think they also, it's hard for them to say no. You know, they don't want to feel like they're turning away someone in their audience. Yeah. Saying no can be hard sometimes. Orc says, crafting is best. Give me all the mats. It's the only reason I play Fallout 4. Alright, so there we go. There's one game that Orc likes. He likes, as I think an Orc really should do, he likes Fallout 4 because he gets the horde everything. Alright, anyways. That's got us all caught up on chat. And it's nearly 2:30 in the morning here.
Yeah, gosh. I'm sorry about that.
No. Don't, why are you don't apologize. Thank you, sir, for sticking around so long and eating up a lot of your time in the day so you can talk to us here. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So, like I said, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I guess I'll talk to everyone next time, and Max, I don't know, we'll chat some more in private messages, maybe tomorrow or some other time about that whole community manager thing.
All good.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you very much, and bye.
Bye, take care.